involved in the crash, and he managed to slow down people for a while, and was very, very late into the stage. True. And if you just get, 10 minutes of an easy ride, the peloton slow down, everybody gets back in very quickly. But here we can see they're rolling along at a very, very fast rate.
I was in that crash, and unfortunately only slowed it down long enough for the Schlecks to get back on. I was still well off the back.
Where was your path thrown down?
But it was the last time, wasn't it? Because he got a lot of heat for that. And then ever since that happened, all of a sudden, I think that that role of patron ebbed a little bit. So, yeah, I think he was the last one, really. Meanwhile, DSM trying to reassemble their kit and their ambitions. I think after a tough one. Treble one is, of course, Romain Bardet. He went strongly yesterday, Dan.
He did, yes. I mean, he came into the race saying, firstly, that he was going to be going for stages rather than general classification, and secondly, that he'd never felt less pressure coming into a Tour de France. That said, I think a lot of the riders that say that are as good as Bardet and Pinot and the likes are in climbing and everything else, they're just not putting pressure on themselves, but just assessing how things go over the first week of the race. And because he's come through relatively unscathed until today, looking at that crash that he's been involved in, he's up there on GC, he's looking pretty good, and it's going to be a difficult decision for them now, whether they do deliberately lose time. I think they'll go for GC as long as he's up there.
Ambitions unscathed until today. Kind of appropriate for so many of the peloton, I guess. But I know what you meant. 168.8 kilometres of the day, 21 seconds. So we're getting on for 20 kilometres into the day so far, Sean, and the advantage is extraordinarily modest, despite the credentials of this trio.
Yes, and taking into consideration that crash, that did slow down things a bit, and they're having trouble, pulling out the advantage. And yeah, it just tells that the pace the peloton are continuing on, although we've had that spill and the slow down for a little bit of time here, and it's not a done deal that this break is going to be able to get the advantage to go into the stage and get the time gap we would expect him to get to have any chance of getting there.
Here's the secret weapon, not so secret because he's absolutely enormous. Pippo Ganna. Yesterday it was used as a kind of a battering ram, and then they thought better of it, Sean. They decided to back out using him, but clearly this is part of a battle plan.
Well, I think yesterday, pulling Ganna out was the thing to do, because with the stage end the way it was, there was nothing they were going to get out of it, and he was up there. He wasn't going to be able to, sit on and get a free ride. So why just burn energy for, no gain whatsoever, and spare him for other days and other situations?
Talk about no gain. It didn't work out for Pinot yesterday, and Godot's been caught out as well. Groupama France-Leger not had a smooth ride at all, Dan.
They haven't in some respects, but Godot's actually looked really good so far in this race. I was slightly hesitant when he said he was going to go for the general classification at the Tour de France, what with all of the dangerous stages at the start of the race and the reasonably lengthy time trials that they've got to deal with at the end of the race on the penultimate day. But so far so good. He's come through relatively unscathed again, and Pinot himself says that Godot is better placed mentally to deal with a leadership role at a Grand Tour. UAE trying to take some sort of control of this race and block the road and try and prevent anyone else from going on the attack. I mean, they're quite happy with the way things are, barring that slight crash for Tadej Pogačar, but they're just trying to calm things down and let this group go up the road.
And it looks like finally that's been achieved. I think so many bumps and bruises we've had so far, they don't want any more messing around. So it looks like we've got half a minute at any moment. And it looks like there is finally some sort of accord, but that won't go down well with some, Sean.
No, but we can see there it's George Bennett who is calling it there, and I think it's nice to see they do that, and they probably want to get some brownie points as well within the UAE team members, because there's still riders getting back in there. We see Quintana with a group of riders. Rigoberto Urán also was trying to make his way back into the rear end of the peloton. So yeah, it's the thing that the big teams want to do. Of course, the team with the yellow jersey, they want to calm it, but the teams want to get into the breakaway. They want to try and get out of this bunch and get across to the breakaway.
Changes of kits, and indeed we'll see some comfort breaks in a short while, I'm certain, if this indeed starts to hold. 48 seconds is now the gap to the breakaway, and after the road has essentially been, or the aggression has been called to a halt here, and largely by Team UAE, but with the acceptance of plenty of other teams as well. Some shoe issues for Romain Bardet, caught up in the crash a short while ago. So many more were, and a chance for everyone to sort of settle their minds. Peter Sagan as well is also back on the bike. Our breakaway, it's only a trio, but it is Matteo Cattaneo, Fred Wright and Freddy Frisson, and they have a minute already, Sean.
Yes, they have a minute, and yeah, it's slowly going out the way, and now is the question of, with the peloton really slow down up front, and the control of the big GC teams wanting to slow things down, will this gap grow out? And they need to grow it out, you know, another probably a minute or 2 minutes, and then the teams would say, oh, this breakaway is a long ways away, we're not going to be able to get across, and they could manage to get many minutes then. But will that continue? And when we get to the first difficult part after around 30 kilometres, they start to kick up. At that point we could see it all kicking off again.
Well, the question then, Sean, is, and I haven't got the answer to this, which teams will do the chasing of this breakaway? Because I don't see Jumbo-Visma wanting to use that amount of energy to bring it back, and I also don't know which other teams will do the chasing, knowing that Van Aert will probably win at the end.
Well, that is always a difficult one, who is going to do the chase, but yeah, you know, Team Bike Exchange, they might be thinking of, you know, the stage today with Matthews, so and some of the other teams as well. If you try and go in the attack, not right on the front of the peloton, you know, 3 out in front. By doing that, you make the race nervous. And if they have maybe 4 minutes before we get to that point, 5 minutes, then you just, you know, reactivate the race again as such, and you know, other teams might get involved as well, and in that way you just reduce the advantage to the breakaway by not putting in too much of an effort, and then it could come back to a sprint between a big group of riders out of the peloton.
Well, the All Nations represented here, Portuguese flag in there. I did wonder whether Ruben Guerrero might have a dig today, but it's not going to be. A few others, names to conjure with. In fact, there's only 3 up the road at the moment, and courtesy of a little bump, hopefully only a little bump for some. We have an accord that's washed over everybody, and it looks like we now have some settlement. It's a long old day today, and minute and 36, they're all going to take themselves a comfort break. Long way from lunch, but you never know, it might be time, an appropriate time, to visit John Harris Bass for our recipe of the day. What have you got for us, John? Is it breakfast?
It is. It's not breakfast at all. Actually, what I've done today is I've sort of been, I guess, a little bit cheeky, because I'm taking a recipe which would have been better suited to a little earlier on in the tour, but I'd actually, oh, this is a beautiful Saltworks, isn't it? Absolutely majestic. Yeah, back to the recipe. I've done a carbonade flamande, which would have been more from the north. It was actually just listening to all of our wonderful experts wax lyrical about their love of Trappist beers. I'd known that I was going to do this recipe. I was either going to do it this year or next, and I decided to cook it for my children. As a consequence, they had to take the picture of it and then mark it, which is why it's ended up being a little bit later on in the tour than perhaps it should have been as far as the geography is concerned. But it's just a lovely one to do with a slow cooker. It involves stewing beef, garlic, bay leaves, a little bit of seasoned flour, a bit of pancetta chucked in there with carrots, onions. You do need to be able to get over yourselves and pour some beer into the cooking, which I know some people are very loath to do. But you do have to do that with a bit of beef stock and some seasonal herbs. And once you've sealed the meat and a bit of the pancetta, it's just a question of tipping it all into a big casserole and then sticking it in the oven, or if you've got a slow cooker, letting that do its work for sort of 2 to 3.5 hours. And then I think it's absolutely superb served with fries, and then to be enjoyed with a Trappist beer of your choice is my suggestion. So I haven't quite got it up on my Instagram, which is at JHB Foodie Cyclist, but all of the other recipes are, and I'll get a link over to you, Carlton, on Twitter, so that it can be tweeted out there and people can find that link as well, with all of the other recipes from the tour. But it's an excellent one for sort of cooler climbs, I would say. Perhaps not one to be enjoyed on a day like today as we begin to go into a heat wave, but there'll be plenty of salads for you to enjoy in the coming weeks.
Those are the best recipes, aren't they? The ones that require an opening of a bottle to keep you refreshed as you're cooking.
I put
a little bit of rosé in my salad dressing these days.
Well,
I would say that's a waste.
Thanks for a slightly more complicated recipe than cheese on toast, which you gave us yesterday, John.
It wasn't cheese on toast.
Oh dear. Bit of embarkation flying anywhere than where it should be. Ben O'Connor with clearly a bang to the hip. He's been through the mill, I'm afraid, as Ben O'Connor, and they're further hobbled, AG2R Citroën, because of Geoffrey Bouchard's absence, and it's looking like a slim roster for them, I'm afraid. Where I mentioned to Sean earlier on, they could have really done with Greg van Avermaet as part of their crew. We talk about the absentees in this race, Dan. We've kind of haven't mentioned them for quite a few days because the racing's been so brilliant, but it's now we start looking at the rosters and thinking, oh, if only.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, but a team just has to make what they think is the best selection for the race and for the goals that they've got within the race based on the riders' form at that particular time and leading into the Tour de France. I see a couple of cuts to the face for Max Chapwin after that crash. Thankfully, he's up and running and looking not too bad, apart from some sort of superficial wounds. But yeah, I fear for O'Connor. It's one of those things that sort of separates people mentally, isn't it? If you look at the way Roglic has dealt with his crash and even higher ambitions in this race overall than Ben O'Connor would have had coming into it, he just seems incredibly enabled to reset when anything happens to him, and a lot has happened to him over the years, and last year was a classic example, wasn't it, where came into this race looking to win it for the first time, was out after about a week of racing, managed to reset himself and not only win the Olympic Games time trial, but then the Vuelta a España. And I just again hope that Ben O'Connor can reset his own brain and his own ambitions for the rest of this race, because I was getting news over Race Radio and our producer Josh that Kevin Vermaak, who was the first rider that hit the deck there for Team DSM in that crash, has unfortunately had to abandon.
That is such a shame. Just coming in from Radio Tour, there it is, confirmation of it. Kevin Vermaak is out of the race. Sad, Sean.
Yes, well, it's always big disappointing for riders to go out of the race, no matter what your objective is in the a 3-week, and especially in the Tour of France. But that's the risk of bike racing, and we've seen Kevin Mark. He's been on the ground a few times in the earlier stages. In Denmark, he was also in more than one crash, if I remember rightly, and unfortunately, that's the risk of this sport.
Three riders up the road, three very strong riders as well, but and they're going to have to be with 2 minutes and 54. Dan, you talk about resets. Primož Roglic apparently yesterday, we know how able he is to refocus and deliver, but Primož apparently riding in pain. I'm just wondering whether that was part of the game plan of Tadej Pogačar to take advantage when possible. Had to pop his own shoulder back in, of course, Primož Roglic, after the run to Arenberg. I hope the pain hasn't just suddenly displayed itself, but let's wait and see.
Yes, he said that every pedal stroke felt like a stab in the back, I think was his quote post-finish yesterday. If that is correct, I'm sure it wasn't quite that bad, but he's undoubtedly in some sort of pain. I think his rivals can be in a little bit of fear, really, because he's got a couple of days where he can take things slightly easier than he will need to in the second and third weeks. So if he can recover and if he can improve day on day and gets back to his best, then as I said, the other riders might have something to fear from Roglic as well as Vingegaard later on in this race. We've already got the answer to our question. I didn't expect Jumbo-Visma to want to expend even more energy today. They've done a lot of riding over the first week of this race. But we've already got Nathan van Hooijdonk riding on the front. 3 minutes the gap up to our three-man group up the road, and it looks like they want another stage win.
Don't forget, we have Wimbledon going on at the moment, of course, in certain markets, absent elsewhere. But if you do get an opportunity to see it on Eurosport, then I'm sure you'll be absolutely delighted. 2 minutes and 55, that's a handsome gap, Sean, but it's only 3.
Well, I suppose when you say it, it's a handsome gap, 2:55, but at this point in the race, it's not a lot. And surprising, as Dan said, to see Jumbo-Visma starting to ride here. You look at Cataneo, he's at only 3:58. So if you just wait here, and I think the team of UAE will start riding at a point, because they do not want to give away the jersey. We've seen the way they have been riding yesterday. So you spare your powers, but again, sometimes the teams, when they have a tactic and they have an objective for the stage, they put it into motion too early. And yeah, in a 3-week tour, I'm certainly not a one where you burn energy where you maybe can spare it and wait and use other teams that maybe have to do the riding a bit later on. And this stage, as we get further into it, it gets more and more difficult. So I think the advantage at the moment, 3 minutes. You could wait, leave it go to 5-6 minutes, and I think before that time there will be other teams might take it up.
Fred Wright, as part of the breakaway, we remind ourselves he finished 7th in Flanders this year. Fantastic performer. A couple of years ago, he was really off the radio, barring McLaren as it was. Finished 4th on stage 15 of La Vuelta, and I think it was the longest stage of that year's race, and it was pretty similar finish profile to today. Just speculating on our breakaway and the strength of it, and whether it is a worry as it goes up to around about 3-minute margin for the time being. Jumbo-Visma happy to keep this one within sight. There is an intermediate sprint coming up as well, let's remind ourselves, and with only 3 up the road, there's still plenty of points up for grabs for Wout van Aert in that competition. It's been busy so far today. Will it get any busier the closer we go? Said to have still problems with his knee, but hasn't displayed itself, thankfully, too badly. And a reminder, it's the women's Wimbledon final coming up. Certain territories only, but if it is within your gift, then something to look forward to. Troubled by level crossings, thank goodness. You heard the bell ringing there, which suggested the barriers were going to come down, but I don't think that was the case. John, in terms of your homage-ometer, I think you've got a potential for at least something significant here in terms of a scoreline. This looks rather impressive. This is absolutely beautiful. We are, of course, in Louis Pasteur country, Dole being the birthplace of Louis Pasteur, the famous French scientist, chemist, physicist. He, of course, developed the vaccine against rabies and founded pasteurization, which, well, I mean, it just took its name from him, rather obviously. And that is quite magnificent. I mean, it's probably going to have to be my first 10, I think, of this particular Tour de France, because that's just quite outstanding. I'm going to give it a 10.
10 from me as well.
There we are. The milkman gets 10. We'll see. He did other things, as John's already described. Little climb. Fabulous to see the crowds back, and the enthusiasm that was garnered in Denmark has been carried into France. Love it. Absolutely love it. Listen to this. As soon as I say it, they end. I was expecting a bit more there. Come on, good burgers. Apparently they are very good burgers here, or steak haché as John would call it. I don't think that's one of his recipes, but after cheese on toast yesterday, it probably will be. 154.6. You can hear him. growling in the other booth here. 2 minutes and 59. Time to take on a little bit of substance and maybe not a little encouragement. What on earth is said to riders in a situation like this, Sean, apart from keep going?
Well, you know, you're hoping that things will stay relaxed back in the peloton, which was the case for a very short time. But now they know that, you know, teams are starting to take it on. Jumbo-Visma are starting to ride, and you know, when you get that information from your DS, you know, then you start to lose the morale a bit and lose the will to continue on pushing as you would normally push if the gap was allowed to grow out. So it is a difficult one, and yeah, today was a day that most people were saying this is a day that the break will go, and it will be a pretty big one. And we're talking about maybe 8 or 15 riders, but it's a tiny one, and this is going to be another one which, yeah, they're going to lose heart here to keep on committed at 100%, unfortunately. And yeah, it could be again a hectic one when we get into the more serious part, the meaty part of this stage. If it pushes on, this advantage will come down so quickly with a small breakaway, and then it could be a battle, you know, between the peloton and between some of the GC men again in this race. And yeah, it's getting a difficult time for the teams that want to get into the breakaway, and the breakaway that's going to go all the way to get something out of this race.
Very beautiful commune here, I must say. Oh, Felix Grosshanna with a puncture. This looks absolutely gorgeous, John. We're just about to climb out of Arbois. This is where we take on a little incline up towards our intermediate sprint, but it looks a handsome place.
It is very, very beautiful. Little trivia fact about Arbois. The symbol of Arbois is a heraldic pelican known as the pelican of piety, feeding its young by piercing its heart with its beak. Obviously a fairly Christian symbol there of sacrifice and giving to others. And the motto of the town is Sic his quos diligio, which is thus I do for those I love. So yeah, I mean, Christianity spreading its rather large wings, or rather large mouth in the case of the pelican, I guess.
Yes, well, I'll have a pint of pelican then, please. One of the nicer of the more modest beers in this part of the world. Let's have some Tour de France stories, shall we?
Start with a strong look there at quite a calf muscle.
And I just realised there's no sprints for a very long time, which is a bit unfortunate.
Would have thought you would have checked that earlier.
Nice shoes, Daddy.
Really cool shoes. Do you like them? One step.
And there is the explanation about the new shoes, all to do with the new cancer charity that Tadej Pogacar was setting up with his fiancée after his fiancée's mum passed away with cancer earlier on in the year. Well, they all made extraordinary efforts up the Super Planche des Belles Filles, some more exacting than others. Well, it's a good question, isn't it? What would you want to do? There is the definition, and what a fighter he is. And he's just been being discussed by our team, Primož Roglič. Looking good. And the public, well, they were out in force. Peter Sagan rewarding them with a wheelie. No mean feat at that particular gradient. And the marginal gains, well, there's some good stories about that ice bath, actually. When it was tipped out, all of the water went flooding down into a local lady's front garden, and apparently looked as though it was going to flood her drive, but at the very last minute did find the gutter and drained away. But she looked pretty miffed, by all accounts.
if a little cooler, I think, than she had been earlier on. Ice baths, Dan, was it something you ever had to suffer?
No, although strangely, I've been having a cold shower every morning this year.
And how's it been going?
I feel no different at all. It's just not a very pleasant experience every morning.
Why are you carrying on then?
Because it's supposed to be good for you.
I don't know. Deep down, I think a bacon sandwich does you the power of good in the morning. But
That's good for morale.
Yeah, exactly that. You take your pleasures where you can get them. And ice showers has never been one of mine.
On that subject, I think we should give Jonathan a challenge of making the most highbrow jacket potato recipe with cheese and beans or bacon sarnie recipe that's ever been written.
He'll rise to it, because we're going to be headed for the dreaded raclette, which is basically just potatoes, cheese, cream and bacony bits, no matter what you say. And it's the thing I hate more than anything else, food-wise. It's bound to be part of the lexicon by the time that we get to the mountains, because, frankly, he just can't help himself. Do you want to respond, John? Because your reputation is being besmirched.
No, but I don't mind the besmirching.
We love a battle, you and I, John.
Yeah, we absolutely do, and we're yet to get into the Beaujolais region. So I'm
perfume. That's all it is.
I'm not entirely sure whether I'm going to do. The French are massive on jacket potatoes. They do a lot of different things with their potatoes.
What do they call them?
I don't think they do jacket potatoes. They do baked potatoes, and I'm trying to remember what that's called.
Potato.
You're just making words up at the moment. Literally making up your own language. But that's okay, because that's what most British people do when they go abroad. Full stop. I haven't absolutely decided what I'm going to do in place. I will definitely do tartiflette. I do that pretty much every year because it's so popular. But I haven't decided. I will definitely, just for Dan, I will look up a really basic recipe, and I will try and give it a much more highbrow name.
Œuf bouillon, 3 minutes. Yes. 51 kilometres to go. 3 minutes and 7 is our gap at the moment. Ralph Micah, yesterday, Sean, he waved Pogacar on into the finale as if, for goodness sake, I could do no more. It was as if he was saying that.
Yes, I think that's what he was saying, and that was the position he was in. He wasn't able to go any further. I think he just, rode himself to a standstill, as we say in cycling. And not surprising, because when you look at UAE team members, the way they were riding there, first of all it was Brandon McNulty, then we had George Bennett, and then we had Micah to finish off, and the pace they were setting was infernal pace, as we call it. Nobody made a move out of the GC men because they just weren't able. They were all happy to cling on there and just stay in the train being set by the team of yellow jersey. And yeah, Pogacar, I think he was not really pushing to win the stage at that point. He started right on the front because they were coming onto the gravel, and you have to keep as much momentum as possible. He did not put in that big attack at that point, which sometimes he's capable of doing. He kept riding a real strong pace, and then when Vingegaard attacked him, I think he decided, I'm not letting him win the stage because we have ridden all day. And he said that in his interview afterwards. The team rode for so long during the day. Jumbo-Visma did not contribute at all. And that's the reaction you have when you get to the end of a stage like that. It's the team that, they profit from your day's work, and you're going to the line there. You do not give them any cadeaux.
Well, it could have been a disaster if Tadej Pogacar had lost to Vingegaard by the time we got to the line. Great encouragement, though, Dan, for everybody that Jumbo-Visma made such a good account of themselves. Ineos Grenadiers, I don't think they were too bad. We were besmirching, or I was anyway, Groupama France Séjour, but Godot crossing the line in 6th place. The forlorn camera, of course, just edging Geraint Thomas at the line. But I think we can take a lot of comfort from it that this race is far from over. And when you factor in the heat of the Alps, it's been said many times that Tadej Pogacar is not a big fan of the heat. We're going to be getting very hot temperatures in the centre of the Alps. It offers up a little hope that this race has got a lot more tales to tell.
I would say so, yes, and I agree with you that we can take a lot of encouragement from yesterday, which sounds like a very strange thing to say when Pogačar's just won his second day in a row, extended his lead courtesy of the bonus seconds, but he's just not been as head and shoulders above everybody else as he was last year, let's say. I know last year that Primož Roglič crashed out in the first week, wasn't at his best, so it was a slightly different race. But we're on stage 8 now, and if we look at stage 8 from last year in the general classification, Pogačar led by 1 minute and 48 from Wout van Aert, who wasn't really a serious GC contender and is not this year either, obviously. So by stage 8 last year, ahead of his closest challenger, Lutsenko, in 3rd place, he was 4:38 ahead. It's much, much closer so far this year, which bodes well for the excitement of the race.
Welcome back, those of you who've been away watching on television. Don't forget, there is another way. If you enjoy your cycling, which why wouldn't you, especially if you're with us at the moment, then GCN Plus offer up a spectacular access points to more cycling than you can shake a stick at. Not just live cycling as well, and many races that you won't be able to find anywhere else, but also a whole host of documentaries and features. It's a fantastic place to be. It's a world of cycling in an app. Go and have a look at it. Have a wander around, and if you decide to sign up for the race pass, the plus section, then you will enjoy a feast of cycling like no other. We're extremely lucky in the sport that we love to have such a service available. Those of you watching on Discovery Plus, also, of course, without interruptions. And if you'd like to avoid that, then you know now where to go. 149 kilometres of the day remaining, 3 minutes and 23. For those of you who have been away, we've just been speculating about how much comfort we can take from the efforts yesterday. And a few cracks opening up, I think it's fair to say, in those that were surrounding Tadej Pogačar, but I was impressed by the strength of Team UAE Emirates yesterday, something we've been posing a few question marks about. And Micah waved on Tadej Pogačar. It was clear that Pogačar was asking for just a little bit more from Micah, which he was unable to offer. And then other teams did show some great strength. And when Vingegaard went around Pogačar, or indeed was leading him in, it looked like, as they snaffled up the forlorn Lenny Kamna. It was amazing to see that Tadej Pogačar was just able to find that extra modicum that was just not at the disposal of others, and came through for the victory, and in the end by a bike length. Absolutely remarkable. As for today, well, we've got a 3-man breakaway. We thought it could be as large as, I don't know, 15, 20. Could have been a mass breakout today. It didn't quite work out like that. Partially down, for those of you just joining us, to a bump earlier on. We've seen a lot of stories told, Dan, from the flag that in previous years would have been absent from the conversation.
It's the same every year, isn't it? We can speculate all we want, and we often do all the way into the lead up to the Tour de France. And then it's only really when you get to a stage like yesterday that you really see who's got it. And that's what was the most pleasant surprise about yesterday. That, yes, we saw Vlasov unexpectedly dropped, and a couple of other performers that weren't quite as good as we might have hoped. But generally speaking, everybody was there or thereabouts. We've still got 4 riders from Ineos Grenadiers in the top 10 of the general classification. We've got Jonas Vingegaard, who looked every bit Pogačar's match yesterday on that final climb. And we've got a Primož Roglič who's not, well, he's down, but he's not out, is he? He's lost a bit of time on the general classification, but he's going pretty well on the climbs as well. So I think just looking at it overall, we've got a lot of great racing to go in this Tour de France, not just for stage wins, not just for the polka dot jersey, but for the yellow jersey. It's far from a done deal. The one done deal, I think, is probably the white jersey as best young rider, which he's still eligible for next year, Tadej Pogačar, which started to make a bit of a mockery of that competition. We spoke about it the other day, didn't we? And there was that person that wrote in with the suggestion that you should only be able to win the white jersey as best young rider once, after which you can only go for yellow. I really like that idea.
Me too. I also think it should be a grey jersey for anyone over, I don't know, pick your mark, 37. Minute and 147 kilometres, Sean, which suggests that we're coming up to our intermediate sprint, which will be in about 8 kilometres time. These guys are 2Ks in arrears, and Team Bike Exchange starting to pick this up and show a bit of ambition here.
Yes, well, I think they're a team that feel today is the day that they can maybe do something in the end for a stage win with Michael Matthews, and they're starting to secure the pace on the front with Jumbo-Visma. And this is going to be the real heartbreak for the men in the breakaway, because they're not being allowed that big advantage that they would have been expecting. With 3 riders, you'd expect them to be maybe, if it was down to the team of yellow jersey, they'd probably be allowed 7 or 8 minutes, although Cataneo is not that far off in the general classification. He's down, I think it was a 19th position at 3:58, so they would control at a point, but other teams just taking no chance at all and taking it up very early and starting to ride on the front of the peloton. The sprint point for the green jersey, I don't think that's what's on their minds. It's just about the stage win here at the end. But there will be a bit of a sprint here, because now there's more points available with a small breakaway out front. But we can see there the latter days there's not as many sprinters interested in green jersey, because Van Aert has such a dominant lead there.
Time for a brief conversation up front. Not sure what is being imparted here. Let's see if we can hear. And if you're wondering at home why we don't hear too much of this conversation, it's because, quite frankly, the effects mics are dialed down here, because it would be unkind, Sean, for us to listen in on all of these conversations, which essentially are meant to be private.
Yes, well, I think it's going to be difficult to get that, and we often have requests and people suggesting it would be nice to hear from the team car all the time.
They don't want you to hear it.
And we would like to hear it as well, because it would make our job much easier, but unfortunately we don't have that. And you can see there, the director, Gert de Bont there from the Quick Step team, a team who have struggled with their directors and also PR personnel. They've had a hard time with COVID, a lot of them being sent home, so they have really to get other directors to come on board here and do the job as director sportive. But I think he's probably saying, yeah, it's not going to happen here, and Gert is probably saying, yeah, you just keep on riding, but knock off your effort a big percentage here, because it's not going to be the day where you're going to have a chance of going all the way to the end.
Now, I understand that is it Team UAE or all in single beds now, Sean, single rooms?
Yes, we had that. We had that information this morning there, that they have been in single rooms, I think, from the start.
Ah, okay. Well, that seems appropriate in the current circumstances. The last thing we want is for the race to become COVID affected. We've seen too much of that already this year. Meanwhile, just 6 kilometres, indeed, just over 6.5 kilometres thereabouts, for this intermediate sprint. It looks like our breakaway is going to hoover up the majority of the points, but plenty still up for grabs. We may well get ourselves a bit of action from the pack behind. It could also, if that engenders a push on, because we're on a plateau all of a sudden, Sean, with a short downhill before we take on a Category 4 test, it might be the narrowing of the gap to the break here.
Yes, well, I'm hoping there will be a bit of a sprint here, because I need a little bit of excitement before I go for lunch.
You're already thinking about lunch. Goodness me. Well, yeah, you've got every right to. I've been busy munching on nuts out here. But, anyway, you can't beat a hickory almond. John will have a recipe for that later on, I'm sure. Well, maybe that's when we get down towards the Spanish borders.
And what are you having, Dan?
I've had my lunch.
That's because he had a cold shower this morning at 6 o'clock, so, for him, he's deep in the afternoon.
I had a jacket potato with beans and cheese and a bacon sarnie.
I wonder what that's called in French. What is a jacket potato in French, Sean? You know this.
It's
Pomme
de terre au four.
There we are. Ha! I knew it. Thank heaven we have these lexica.
And pomme de terre is a fancy, so patate au four.
Historically, I think the Brits have always done vegetables better. There we are. I've said it. I know it's a bit of a, whenever you ask for potatoes, even in a posh restaurant, it generally seems to come out of a tin. Don't know why.
I'm just not going to let that go. Absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you go, Brits have done vegetables better. Yeah. Root vegetables, British people managed to do okay. But, I mean, just no. It's
listen to him, ladies and gentlemen.
I think if you look at the way... that
nothing wrong with mashed swede. That's all I'm saying.
There's nothing wrong with it. But the way that the majority of vegetables are cooked in Britain nowadays has taken a huge amount from Mediterranean cooking, and the Italians it was Catherine de Medici who brought the Italian chefs up to France, and then the French then took that onto a new level. I think you've got peasant cooking right the way across Europe that is very, very similar in many ways, but I'm not going to let you get away with a sweeping generalisation about Britain's people cooking vegetables better than the French.
Do we cook pasta better than the French, John?
Well, now that is a controversial one, isn't it?
I think we do anything potatoey, whether it's mash or roasts or indeed jacket potatoes. I think we do them better. But anyway, I'm not meaning to upset the apple cart or the carte de pomme.
There you go. Almost perfect French.
Oh, thanks, mate.
He's really struggling, Ben O'Connor at the back here, isn't he? He's shaking his head. It looks like he's been down again today, or at least he's got an injury that's still with him from a day or two ago, and he's just not in a good mental frame of mind right now. He's hovering at the back, shaking his head, and I hope he doesn't pull out of the race, but he doesn't look like he's far away from throwing in the towel.
No, he went back to the medical car earlier on, Dan, and they kind of got out the magic spray. Most of it looked like it was dealing with flies. It didn't seem to hit the target, but I think he was looking. But he clearly has an issue. It's as simple as that.
And the question I have for Carlton is, how come the magic spray works so great in football?
I have no idea. The point is, in cycling, you generally tend to hide your injuries, and in football, you make the most of them. Sweeping generalisation, I know, but generally you fake being okay in cycling, and they're hard men. And when you see this kind of display from Ben O'Connor, he's an open book, Sean, but this is real. He's got problems.
Well, he is suffering, and yeah, what a disappointment is for our Australian viewers, because we came into this race, Jack Haig, we're expecting big things from him. O'Connor here after his performance last year. And when he got back into the top three in the GC, third overall, I remember with Dan we had a talk about it, and I said no, he's not going to last there after the effort he put into the stage to teen. I thought he would suffer majorly the following days, but he got through very well, suffered a bit on the Mont Ventoux, but put in a great performance in that final week to really stay up there and finish fourth in the GC standings. And from both the two riders, the two Aussies, we were expecting big things in the GC battle, in the top place, maybe for a podium, and definitely in the top five. But crashes, just taking them out.
Well, we have our intermediate sprint coming up, and they're lining up for it. Let's see how this one pans out. We'll have the three essentially roll over out front, but, and here we are, kilometre to go. Not quite sure how feisty this will be fought for, Sean.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, is there an agreement here between the riders, but yeah, Cataneo might be the one who'll try and just steal a march here and take the maximum, take the points and take the prize money as well. Every little counts, of course, over the 3 weeks racing, every day a little bit into the pot. It all adds up at the end of the race.
So let's see. It was a tough day yesterday. Let's see if any of the quick men's legs have been left behind. Wout van Aert is possibly, of course, favourite for this. He's been lively at the beginning of the day. He wears the green jersey, of course, which he of course owns by a handsome margin as well. 63 points in the lead ahead of Fabio Jakobsen, who we expected to be out there sniping for some of these intermediates potentially. And you heard from Caleb Ewan as well, saying, look, it's an awful long way before our next sprinting day. Carcassonne on stage 15 by the looks of things. I suppose you might think the running to Saint-Etienne might have something about that, but not quite so sure. It's amazing how, as you often said, Sean, as we'll watch these guys essentially roll through the sprint, you've often said that riders just think about Grand Tours day by day, and so no surprise really that Caleb Ewan suddenly realised how long it is before that sprint day for him.
Yes, well, when you start the tour, of course, you look at the route, you know, the overall route. As we can see, no contest here as we roll through the sprint, and Fred Wright taking the top place there. But yeah, you look at the race route and you have an idea of the days to come, but still you have to refresh every couple of days. And it's not surprising to see Caleb Ewan looking at the road book there and seeing how far it is for the next real Sprinters' Day.
Indeed. Yeah, day by day is how you've got to take it. Nice day for Fred Wright. He's just taken the intermediate sprint points here, which are 20. So 2017 and 15 have just been taken. 13 points up for grabs for whoever crosses the line next. A handsome amount of points at the intermediate sprint, Sean, down to 15 places.
Yes, well, there is, and the question is now, will it be contested? Because yesterday's intermediate sprint, we did see there, you know, the guys back in the peloton who were sprinting, it was only a half effort really, and you know, the final couple of metres of the line they pushed a bit, with Wout van Aert taking you know, the maximum points available after the breakaway, and I think it's going to be pretty much the same today, unfortunately.
I think you're right. Drinks being offered up. Although yesterday I felt like I had a bit more belief in the breakaway, and it nearly got there in the hands of Lenny Kamna, Sean. He came very close, didn't he?
Well, that was a monstrous performance by Kamna. It was so disappointed to see him getting caught in, you know, just around the 200 metres or 150 metres before the line. Like the effort he put in on Planche de Belleville, when you look at the advantage they had at the bottom, and you know, at 10 kilometres to go, I think the difference was about 140, and you know, the ride that he did there, considering the way UAE were riding, you know, with fresh riders coming onto the climb, with world-class climbers, because you know, McNulty, Bennett, Micah, all of those guys, like, they're huge class riders in that sort of terrain, and the way he rode, and that's what Kamna can do. When he gets into a breakaway, he can finish off. And I did say going to the final yesterday, will there be a rider that can put in a real strong performance, one of these, you know, rides of the day? And Kamna definitely did that, but unfortunately a little bit too short. Yeah,
a real shame. Now then, let's see how this one pans out. Nice to see Mathieu van der Poel having a sniff at this one. Wout van Aert in the green jersey. On his back wheel is Philipsen. Van der Poel here from Alpecin de Koenig. Philipsen, I beg your pardon. Yes, with Philipsen. Beg your pardon. Here we are, 300 metres to go. So, time to pick it up. Green jersey. Time to dig. And Philipsen fancies a little bit of this. In fact, he's got some rush room here, a bit like a tracking. He's going to come right around Jakobsen, is he? All to the line. Is it going to be the green jersey? It was very close. Jasper Philipsen nearly stole that, Sean. In fact, he may well have done so.
I think, yes, Philipsen just ahead of Wout van Aert. Again, you know, the same as yesterday. We just see this the riders being led in by the team of Jumbo-Visma, Wout van Aert, and then making that I suppose 75% of an effort in that sprint.
Just let up a little bit, just laid off momentarily to give himself some rush room. Used it perfectly, and here it is. Talk us through this, Dan.
Yeah, you're exactly right. He gave himself some rush room, a sprinter's gap, as we often call it. And pretty close on the line, wasn't it? We'll have to wait for the photo finish on that one. But it's a strange one with Philipsen, because he didn't go for the intermediate sprints for the first 4 or 5 road stages. In fact, I think that yesterday or the day before was the first time we've seen him go for one of the intermediate sprints. So it's a little bit late in some respects. I tell you what, Fabio Jakobsen reminds me so much of Mark Cavendish when it comes to intermediate sprints. He just can't get the same motivation to put into them as he would do for a sniff of a win at a finish line sprint. Understandable in some ways, but it's just interesting to see how similar those characteristics are. That Van Aert's been incredibly consistent at the intermediate sprints, whereas Jakobsen, you know, he can just push himself that 5–10% more when it comes to a finish line sprint.
Gianni Moscon has abandoned the race. He's been very quiet. As Understandable, I guess you might say, considering how he has been appearing of late. But yeah, it hasn't really been a major feature of this one, I'm afraid. We're going to be heading for a brief break. And when those of you who are heading off return, you'll find that Rob Hatch is here, who's about to join us now. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Cotton. How are we all?
Oh, it's been another one of those. We were expecting a mass breakout, and it's turned into something of a conundrum.
Well, they're chasing rather well, aren't we, as we see the intermediate sprint there. Day 8 today, country number 4 coming up, and this was an intermediate sprint, it looks to me from that shot, for Philipsen, but we will wait to see. And there is the proof. Philipsen getting the better of Wout van Aert, with Christophe Laporte and Fabio Jakobsen taking up those 4 places behind this 3-man break. Well, thanks, Cotton. We'll hear from you a little later on our way into Switzerland. And these are the points. 20 points for Fred Wright there. Rider from London, just 23 years of age, from Bahrain. Frederic Frison, now 29, finishing in the 2nd place there. And Mattia Cattaneo, 2nd in Tignes last year. Remember, to Ben O'Connor, who's been struggling at the back. He was 3rd in that sprint. Points going all the way down there to the line. Riders from UAE in that line picking up the points, but not, of course, in the points competition, really. The likes of Bennett, Soulaire and Hirschi. Hirschi, who incidentally was last man yesterday at Planche-les-Belles-Filles. 22 minutes down. White jersey on the back of Thomas Pidcock. Of course, it is held and controlled by Tadej Pogacar. Sean, I know you're somebody, along with your good mate Kurt Bogarts, who's following Tom Pidcock's career closely. I thought he was in fine form yesterday, and something jumped out at me. He finished in front of Nairo Quintana on a mountaintop finish.
Yes, well, it was a great performance by Pidcock, and a rider. He's first Tour de France, first time maybe in that level against the riders, that sort of finish. He did an excellent ride there to finish just ahead of Quintana, and very close to Danny Martinez, the same time as Martinez and Rigoberto Urán. So he was in top class company, and that was a real good ride from the young Ineos Grenadiers rider.
Yeah, 4 riders in the top 10 for Ineos Grenadiers. It has not been a disastrous start by any means for them. Of course, the worst placed out of those 4 riders is Martinez at 1:55. Pidcock himself is 7th overall at 1:35 from Tadej Pogacar. Adam Yates 4th at 1:18. Geraint Thomas on the podium at the moment. He's at 1 minute and 10 seconds. The Welsh former winner of the Tour de France. And the Tour today is into the Jura, climbing into Switzerland via the mountain range. And just under 133 k's to get to Lausanne, our destination today. Good afternoon, everybody. Rob Hatch replacing Cotton Kirby for a little while. He'll be back along later on. Daniel Lloyd, Sean Kelly with me for a moment. We'll also be hearing, as usual today, from Robbie McEwen and Adam Blythe. The wind blowing from the side right now. And the chase is on, isn't it? Mattia Cattaneo up the road, the most dangerous in the general classification, at 3 minutes and 58 seconds from the lead of Tadej Pogacar. But it isn't his team that's chasing, it's this man's team. Wout van Aert obviously wants to win again today. In the green jersey, cementing that bit by bit, even though we're only on to stage 8 today. He has a 63-point lead in that competition. Bike Exchange also very keen today. And we've seen a couple of their riders riding. The man doing the business at the moment is Amund Grøndal Jansen. We've seen Chris Juul Jensen up there too. And they're keeping this 3-man break at 3 minutes and 3 seconds. 4 classified climbs to go today. A couple of unclassified runs to the line too. In the general classification, we've just been talking up the Ineos Grenadiers. Let's hear from their sports director, Steve Cummings.
Steve, great day for the team yesterday. Geraint moving up to 3rd place overall. Tom Pidcock keeping the white jersey warm for the race leader, and 4 rides in the top 10. Happy so far?
Yeah, delicious. No, all good. It's a big challenge, you know, to come in and try and protect or try and support like 3-4 riders, and the guys have really done well, committed to what we've asked, and yeah, at times they've sacrificed. You know, Tom's been riding in the first few stages on the front of the tour when we've asked him to, and he's still learning the final, so very good. And G, yeah, was really strong yesterday, really strong. And yeah, Adam was as well. He was slipping a little bit on the gravel in the final. Danny is also good. It's not the best stage yesterday probably for Danny and G. Quite explosive. So as we get deeper into these mountain stages, it would be better, I think, for Danny and G as well.
I mean, looking at the 4 riders in the top 10, all of your GC hopefuls, quite clearly now, although you haven't had to take control of the race at any point, but you are the team with most strength in depth in terms of posing potential problems for the other teams.
Yeah, I hope so. We just go day by day, you know, and when we don't have the responsibility to control, it just means we've got more opportunities. So today we can try with Filippo maybe to fight for the stage, or even Tom in the final, depends how the race goes.
Well, a heads up as to how things might go. Of course, the breakaway has gone, so Filippo Ganna's chance, you imagine, will have gone as well. But Dan, a really interesting look at things there in Ineos Grenadiers. Of course, not the same way they used to ride. Of course, they don't have the top rider anymore, certainly not on paper, and with what we've seen today Pogacar do over the last couple of years. But they do have those numbers to play with.
They do, yes. It's exactly what we were talking about on our breakaway show pre-race this morning, that's what they've got to do, but it is a new scenario for them during their most successful years, where they won 6 of 7 consecutive Tours de France at one point, I think, didn't they? But they always had the strongest rider in those tours, and they could all back that one person who was able to finish it off during the 3 weeks. They're in such a different situation now, where head-to-head they don't really have a single rider that's going to be able to match or beat Pogacar, possibly even Roglic and Vingegaard as well, even though Roglic is a bit out of the GC now. But they do have those numbers to play with. Now, we often talk about numbers to play with, and it rarely seems to come to much at the end of a 3-week race, but you can only hope, really, and they are all very strong riders. Pidcock is definitely an unknown territory, and I would not be surprised to see him fall out of the GC once we get to the really high mountains. Never say never, but it's his first time being up here in the top 10 of a GC at a Grand Tour in his career so far. But with the other 3, lots of experience there, quality riders, a lot of talent, and a former winner of the Tour de France with Geraint Thomas, who's been looking great recently. So they're doing the right thing, just making sure that they keep everybody up there, which they didn't do at the Giro, did they? I mean, at the Giro we kept on saying, well, let's keep Richie Porte up there. Well, certainly I was saying that, just because you can never know what might happen or where he might be able to get some time and really put some pressure on their key rivals. But there they rode all for Richard Carapaz, and it just didn't work out for them on the penultimate day of the race. So I think they're doing the right thing. They've got lots of riders that are within range of the lead of this race, and they'll just have to hope that those numbers will benefit them once we get into the higher mountains and the days with back-to-back climbs, because we've not had any of them yet.
It was interesting as well, Sean, hearing that Steve Cummings said there that they'd asked Pidcock to ride. They'd specifically asked him to stay up there on GC and try and be up there yesterday.
Yes, and we did see Pidcock in the flatter stages, the earlier days. He was riding on the front and you know, keeping the GC men, the top 3 ones we've talked about, out of danger. But I think it's a learning process for Tom Pidcock as well. You know, last year, before the Vuelta, people were asking, will Pidcock win a 3-week tour? And I said, well, we have to wait and see what way he will support a 3-weeker, and the final week of the 3-week race, that's where you can see if a guy is able to manage those 3-week races, because riders, they can win week-long races and win many of them, but they're not able to just digest a 3-weeker. And Pidcock did very well in Vuelta last year. He was riding for the team very aggressively in the final week. So I think here is just a little bit of, you know, test him and see what he can do, but also use him, and that's what we've been hearing from the team direction there. You know, they're going to use him at a point, and I think he's going to fall out, as Dan say, in the GC standings. But it's all about, serving your apprenticeship in a 3-week race, and that's what Pidcock is going to be doing here again.
It's good that he has that opportunity to develop, I guess, without too much pressure. And Tan, given the fanfare around him, winner of the Baby Giro, all the things he's done on the other bikes he rides in the Olympic Games, as a gold medalist in the mountain bike, world champion on the crossfield, and of course he was already coming for a while, wasn't he, on the crossfield before that. There was always going to be a lot of fanfare, and it was always going to be perhaps a bigger task to protect him from all of that pressure, as opposed to maybe, heaping a bit of pressure on him. And I think just looking after him was always going to be a difficult task. Yeah,
he's clearly an incredible talent in multiple disciplines. You've mentioned him there, Rob, in the road that we've seen the last couple of days, but he's only had that one road win as a pro, hasn't he, on the Brabantse Pijl last year. Spectacular win it was, in out-sprinting Wout van Aert towards the line on a slight uphill finish. Very close. Some people didn't think he won Amstel Gold in a photo finish last year. He's up there in the mountain bikes. He's an Olympic champion. He's won the biggest cross race in the world. He's world cyclocross champion. He's clearly incredibly talented, but I'm still struggling to see what his speciality is going to be on the road. And he probably just doesn't want to specialise yet. He's quite happy to go through the motions of experimenting with different races and really see where he might have his biggest opportunity to shine. But he's certainly a very exciting ride. I just don't know in which direction he will go in his road career. And I think once you get to this point in this sport, you do have to have a specialism. It's come so far that it's very difficult to do multiple things really, really well. So will that be the classics? Will you start to focus on 1-week tours or 3-week tours? I mean, the world's his oyster in many respects, isn't it? I just don't know which way he's going to go as yet.
Well, talking about speciality and different aspects of the sport, I'm reminded that there's a brand new GCN book out down at the moment. It's called The Fan's Guide to Pro Cycling. It's written by Peter Cossins, I know, with lots of contributions from people like you. We've got some fantastic photos of Sean in there as well. We mentioned it briefly during the Giro when it went on sale, but I've had a chance to have a look at it since then, and there's really something for everyone in there, isn't there? A lot of talking about, the different aspects of the sport, and just reminding me there, and the specialities you were talking about, it's worth a mention to people, isn't it?
It is, yes. It's been going down really well, I've got to say, and not an easy task that we set Peter Cossins in writing something that would, as you said, have something for everybody, whether you've been an ardent fan of pro cycling for a couple of decades, or whether you're just getting into this sport, as many people listening will be, and just trying to get your head around the nuances of pro cycling, why things happen when they do. And it's one of those sports that gives, the more you give it, the more it gives you back. The more you understand what's going on, the more intrigued you are by how teams are playing their own tactics and how things play out. And so Pete's done a fantastic job at fulfilling what we asked him to do and making sure there is something in there for everyone. But if you're just getting into the sport, you know somebody that is, I would thoroughly recommend it, because it does explain the tactics and the nuances of our sport very well indeed. But there is still a lot for people that have been into it for a long time, and you managed to get some fantastic current and ex-pro contributors to it as well. So yeah, well worth a read. It's available at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com if you'd like to check it out.
Yep, and that is The Complete Fan's Guide to Pro Cycling by Peter Cossins. These narrow roads on our way out of France and into Switzerland.
Look grippy, don't they, Rob?
They are. I mean, they are. It's a very different region, the Jura. Narrow roads, narrow climbs, twisty turny. That's here at the Tour, but there's other sport going on elsewhere too.
Buongiorno and welcome to the 6 hours of Monza, the mythical Autodromo di Monza, Temple of Speed, 4th round of the World Endurance Championship. It's going to be a cool one after the 24 hours of Le Mans. A big story in Italy this weekend, Jethro.
Yeah, there is just one story that counts, really, and that is that these guys, Peugeot, are back with a brand new hypercar. It's their debut weekend. They said they don't want to set too many expectations, but they also said they're here to win, so it's going to be a fierce battle at the front.
Yeah, and we can't wait to see that on Sunday. Tune in at 11:30 for the grid with Anthony Davidson. 12, the start of the race, the battle in the hypercar category with the two Peugeot. Be there, and with Anthony also, we'll have so much fun.
Thank you very much. Reminder to check your schedules on the Discovery Plus platform. And here on the Tour, you come for the race, stay for the ride. You can watch the Tour de France every single pedal stroke on Discovery Plus. Sean's gone off for a little bit of lunch. Dan's still with me as we're on these twisty, turny roads. And yeah, the roads do seem very, very different around here. Both sides of the border, actually. I mean, the Swiss side, you do feel like you're in the same region, even though it straddles two countries. You remember the Jura Mountains from most editions of the Tour de Romandie. Watchmaking country once we get over the hill. And the odd, very pretty chateau as well. It's the Villa Paladienne de Siam. Rather pretty in the summer weather, isn't it? Well, 123 Ks to go. Most of the stage so far has been identical to the stage that we had in 2017 to Station des Rousses, where Lilian Calmerjan won. Of course, the day where he got cramp. Almost didn't work for him in the end. The first 50 kilometres were absolutely identical, so a lot of the riders will know these roads and the way we've ridden them. But we've just turned off that route now, just about 10 kilometres back after we went through that intermediate sprint. Oh, one long line here. Plenty of history on that first 50 kilometres of the stage as well. Going through Arbois, I know that Jonathan marked it out. And we had, I think, perfect 10s all round for the brilliant homage to Louis Pasteur, who's creator of the vaccine. His name will have been mentioned more than once or twice on the news in the last couple of years. That was Guy Niv in the blue jersey there for Israel Premier Tech going backwards to the car. And this is Christopher Juhl Jensen at the front. Him and Nathan Verhooydonk have been doing most of the work. Verhooydonk, top rider from Belgium, rides for Jumbo-Visma, just signed a contract extension actually. It's that time of year again where agents are having meetings on rest days. Chats about whether you'll carry on, or you might be looking this year or next year. It's become, and it's becoming each and every year, Dan, a much more busy time, isn't it? You can often see corners of hotel receptions now and waiting rooms where there's a chat or two between agent and boss.
Yeah, it's starting earlier and earlier as well, isn't it? Even though they can't really announce anything until the 1st of August due to the UCI regulations on rider transfers. But those talks are starting to happen in February, March on certain occasions if a rider's in their last year of their contract. And it's happening more with young riders as well, isn't it? Because of the success of young riders over the last few years, the teams are scouting not just under 23 races, but the juniors, and even before that, very, very young ages, where they're searching out the biggest talent in the sport and trying to secure them. Or we're seeing longer-term contracts too, aren't we? That Juan Ayuso, who was signed by UAE Team Emirates, he was on a 5-year contract. I think they've just signed another Swiss rider, I forget his name now, but he became World Junior Cyclocross Champion in the States in Fayetteville at the start of this year. He's now on a long-term contract and we'll start with them soon. So UAE have been particularly vigilant when it comes to the young riders and getting them on long-term contracts, and so other teams are having to start to do the same. Whereas Lefebvre just looks for riders that appear to be past their best, gets them into his team at a cheaper price, and they start winning again.
Horses for courses, different business models. Certainly works for him. Special delivery for Nathan Verhooydonk at the front. wonder if he had the tracking on his app there to see when the delivery was going to arrive. There you go. Hope it was what he ordered. Steven Kruijswijk, the courier today.
Would be funny if they came back to the front with a big square backpack on, wouldn't it?
You think he'll tip him?
I mean, that would be the ultimate sponsorship opportunity, surely.
I'm amazed nobody's thought of it actually yet. Well, maybe someone has and they don't need it.
We're actually seeing much less of riders going back and collecting loads of bottles and bringing them back to the front. I think we've got a lot more teams who are putting soigneurs on the side of the road with more regularity, so that you can just pick things up as you go along. And I think that is partly because the UCI have opened things up, I believe, so that it's not just 1 or 2 feed zones. You can sort of pick your moments on the side of the road, and you're able to do that more often. But also I think there's more of a reluctance to go back, such as the intensity of the racing for much of the stages and throughout the stages that we see at the Grand Tours, that you don't really want to have to use that energy to go all the way back to your team car. And yes, you'll put your hand up at the back of the race and the commissaire will call your team car forward, so it's not like you have to go all the way down the convoy of cars to pick up your bottles, but just in getting from the back of the peloton to the front, it does take some energy, and so that is something that's changed over recent years.
Beautiful scenery of the Jura doesn't change. Exposed rock faces, and you remember some famous stages we've had down these years. First big win for Tadej Pogačar when the Tour de France was in this region at Grand Colombier. It was in September 2020. And we were talking about Tom Pidcock and Tadej Pogačar earlier. There's Mattia Cattaneo for an example that success at youth level doesn't always translate to the same sort of success, or being the same sort of rider at senior level. Mattia Cattaneo is a very solid professional. He has 3 very good wins to his name, but he's a rider who won the under-23 Giro d'Italia a long time ago now. Has not translated into general classification success at senior level, or even serious tilts at GC riding. But he's up there in the breakaway today. And at 3 minutes 58, he might have been hoping to have a whiff of sneaking away with a yellow jersey for a day or two. But they're very much controlling behind. And when I say they, Bike Exchange and Jumbo-Visma. In the meantime, Ben O'Connor. I'm with you, Dan. You mentioned it early on. He's got that look about him today. He's really fighting on, isn't he? But you would not be surprised if today was the last day he was on the bike. Let's hope it's not the case, but he really looks like he's struggling.
His head's fallen off completely, hasn't it? And I understand that. If you come in with such lofty ambitions, having done so well 12 months ago, and it all goes to pot in the first week of the race, it's difficult to reset your brain and refocus. And he might well be injured as well, which is not going to help, obviously, either. But it's different with different rides, isn't it? And I just think if Ben O'Connor got through this day and the next day, and he never knows how he might feel, and he might be able to take another stage win further down the line. But just hovering at the back there and sort of wallowing in how he's feeling. To be fair, I kind of got an insight into that, and a lot of us did last year after he had that stage win, and he went into second on GC. And I don't know if you remember, Rob, but on that following day to the double ascent of Mont Ventoux, he'd heaped so much pressure on himself to remain in second on GC that as he was distanced deep into the race, now when there's only a few riders left, and you could see that his head was falling off and he was shaking his head, and you know, it's difficult when you put that much pressure on yourself. It can be quite detrimental to your performance, I think. But he's clearly that sort of character that just has these expectations, and when it doesn't go quite how he's expecting it, he finds it hard to deal with.
How's it been going for Jumbo-Visma, as they expected or not? Let's find out with Frans Maassen, the sports director.
Frans, a fantastic ride by Jonas yesterday. You must be very, very happy with his form, his condition, and his aggressiveness.
But he was a bit disappointed. He thought he would take the stage. So, of course, we were really, really happy because it was a fantastic stage. We were there with 3-4 riders in the best 20, and almost succeeded to win, to have a big win over there.
And what about Primoz? Obviously carrying this injury, third place on the stage. He's clearly bounced back and is still in contention, although he's a couple of minutes down.
Yeah, for us it was really good to see that he was third, because after this crash, of course, you don't feel that good, but being third on that stage so fast after this crash gives us a lot of confidence and hope.
And what about Wout van Aert? Obviously raced with real panache, real verve in the green jersey. How are you going to manage his recovery in the next few stages and look at the GC as well?
Yeah, we have to look day by day. Of course, yesterday he had some easy day. Of course, when Wout would try till the finish, he could have been also maybe in the best 25. But he took some rest from the start of the climb. So today could be another day. But of course the break can go till the end. So it's difficult to have a bunch sprint today.
Well, he might have changed his tune since then, because it's they who are riding to try and make it some sort of sprint today. Although looking at the finale, the words bunch sprint don't really go with today's finale, I don't think, do they, Dan?
No, and from that point of view, it's a huge opportunity for Wout van Aert to stamp even more authority on the green jersey competition, isn't it? Because this stage, each stage has got a difficulty coefficient, and with that comes a different attribution of points for the days. In the high mountains, there are fewer points allocated at the finish, whereas today it's a coefficient of 2, which means you get the same number of points if you win today as you would do on a flat finish and a sprint finish. So, given that Fabio Jakobsen is unlikely to be able to be right up there at the end of the day, because it does finish up a climb, Wout van Aert could, in theory, take the 50 points and stage winner to add to those that he got at the intermediate sprint a few moments ago. So 63 points of advantage at the start of the day. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's well over 100 points advantage by the end.
And we're heading to Lausanne. Wout van Aert is a Belgian, but he rides for a Dutch team, and there's been plenty of success in recent stages in Lausanne, the city of 150,000 people in Switzerland, right on the shores of Lac Le Mans, Lake Geneva. In the meantime, we're still in France, and we're moving into Bourgogne-Franche-Comté. But we're going over the little border there to the right-hand side of that graphic and heading into Switzerland. Yeah, Dutch success in 1978. Red, white and blue colours of the Netherlands took pride of place in the capital of the Olympic movement. Henry Knetemann won the stage, and Joop Zoetemelk kept the yellow jersey that he'd taken 3 days earlier. So Jumbo-Visma, perhaps knowing their history, more likely just thinking that Wout van Aert has a great opportunity again. Bike exchange continued to ride for Michael Matthews, who's looked brilliant, and only his good friend Tadej Pogačar was able to beat him the other day when we went to Longwy. Second place there, and yesterday second place Jonas Vingegaard. He loves a second place behind Pogačar, doesn't he? His last 5 second place stage finishes have all been behind Pogačar. So the Tour last year, stages 17 and 18. Tirreno this spring, stages 4 and 6 as well, and then stage 7 of the Tour yesterday. He was also second in the GC behind Pogačar at the Tour last year, and in Tirreno Adriatico this year. Vingegaard, the young Dane, has only won once ahead of Pogačar. That was stage 5 of the UAE Tour. You have to go back a good 18 months for that in 2021.
Our own statistician Killian Kelly tweeted something similar yesterday. He said of the last 10 times that Vingegaard has finished in second place, including final jersey classifications, 9 of them have been behind Pogačar, and the other one was behind his own teammate Primož Roglič.
Wow. Well, he set another record, did Pogačar, yesterday. The first man to keep his yellow jersey in the Planche des Belles Filles. Of course, he took it off Primož Roglič last time. He kept it yesterday. Before then, in 2019, when we were there, the first Super Planche des Belles Filles finish, Alaphilippe lost the jersey to Ciccone. As we see a problem there on the right-hand side. In 2017, the jersey passed from Geraint Thomas to Chris Froome. 2014, Tony Galopin, who'd had it, I think, since the stage at Mulhouse. Well, it passed to Vincenzo Nibali on that day. I think it had been given away briefly by Nibali. He'd had it in Sheffield, remember? And the first ever visit, Fabian Cancellara, we talked about this yesterday, losing the yellow jersey to our very own Bradley Wiggins. And this gap continuing to come down. Here's Michael Matthews.
A rip on his shorts there, isn't there?
Well, we did see on the other side a moment ago a rider from Bike Exchange on the side of the road. I wonder if that was a separate incident or if Matthews went down in that mass crash that did a lot more damage than perhaps it seemed at the time. I think we've seen O'Connor out the back. Of course, we've since had abandons, haven't we? Gianni Moscon and Kevin Benmarker, who was the rider who went down at the time. 2.5 minutes then, with just under 115 kilometres to go. Not far now from our first classified climb. In fact, the road's going uphill already. And the first classified climb today is the Côte du Maraîcher. Here's the chap between Catania and Frison, and it looks as though he's got the plan. I heard the words full gas there. 5Ks full gas, I think I heard. Interesting how the breakaway actually works together, Dan, during a stage.
Yeah, and again, if you're just joining us and watching this sport for the first time, you might think to yourself, well, if you're in the breakaway, surely you go as hard as you possibly can for the length and the duration of the stage that's still in front of you. They don't do it like that anymore, because the peloton, with a 3-man breakaway up the road, is always in control. I mean, unless you've got Van der Poel in his best form with Van Aert and Pogacar up the road, a peloton is always going to be able to control it, and so they will leave it at a gap that they are comfortable with. And the gap they're comfortable with at the moment is sort of 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. It's at the lower end of that right now. But if the breakaway slows down, so will the peloton, because they don't want to catch the break too early, because at that point we might get fresh riders trying to go on the attack, we might get a bigger group going up the road, and it makes it much more difficult to control the race. But the breakaway knows that, and that's why we heard Catania talking to his breakaway companions there. They'll have a plan in place where they'll just go at a steady tempo, knowing that their gap will remain pretty similar, that the peloton's going to match their pace. But they'll have a point in the row where they think, if from that point onwards we go absolutely flat out, by the time the peloton realise what we're doing, we might have an extra minute on our time gap, and that will just give them the best opportunity. But they can have all the tactical plans in the world in the break up the road today. I think when you've got a Jumbo-Visma team that's clearly intent on bringing it back, and they're getting help from Team Bike Exchange as well, very, very slim chance that the breakaway is going to make it today.
Yes, all the plans in the world. It needs to be something pretty special, doesn't it? 2.5 minutes. Robin McEwen just in touch with me, by the way, to say Michael Matthews did go down earlier on in that crash. That's where the ripped shorts was from, as we're on to our first classified climb of the day. Côte du Maraîcher. Still in France right now. And I think we're around, where if I look up the road? Do my very poor maths here. 25 kilometres from the border. 2Ks to the top, and just 1 point available at the top here. 2 kilometres at 5.7% for a 4th category climb. Magnus Kort's jersey not in danger. Let's go to Bradley.
We are just going through the peloton right now here, look. I tell you what, this race is riding at some tempo at the moment. Not giving an inch to this breakaway trio that have gone away here. So it looks like we could have a mass sprint at the finish here. Well, certainly a group sprint, a bit like we had in Longwy there with a lot of the GC guys contending that. Very quiet in the peloton, all the teams grouping together here. Just see next to us here, Education First, Easy Post. Of course, with Magnus Kort still in that polka dot jersey. We're right in the heart of the peloton here. There's Rigoberto around. Hello, Rigo. ¿Cómo estás? Sí. Yeah. I'm helping you. Rigoberto's happy as ever as we pass through now. I tell you what, it's the temperature's dropped a little bit. It's not as hot as it was this morning, but nonetheless, the pace of this peloton today, I tell you what, I thought, and many people thought, that a group would go away and there'd be quite a substantial group going to that finish, but it's not to be, and it's Jumbo-Visma that are setting the pace, surprisingly, actually, which shows... We did speak to Franz Marser, me and myself and Matt Stevens this morning, and Franz said that he's the Lotto Jumbo director sportif, that Jonas Vingegaard was a bit disappointed yesterday. He expected to win that, so it shows the confidence that that lad has, particularly against Tadej Pogacar. Just coming up the front here. Everyone's riding in their little groups and teams, not much chatting going on. Riders, certainly the GC riders, tend to feel very, very secure with all their teams around them. There's Tom Pidcock, what a great ride he's doing in his first Tour de France. And of course UAE, one bike exchange, and of course Jumbo-Visma setting the pace today. All to come then later on. I will hand you back to the commentary team with that.
Thank you, Brad. Always great to get down there in and amongst the riders and find out what it looks like. Invariably, always a different look and feel from what we see to the helicopter. It's a useful exercise. Brad noting the nervousness there, the fact that everybody's down together, and it might look from that image that they're riding along at a decent enough pace, but Brad saying it's quick again. Halfway up this climb then, 6%, and the gap not tumbling, but the seconds are shaving off. Catania in the blue and white, rider from northern Italy. And the peloton hitting the slopes of it as well. Still Ben O'Connor off the back and fighting to stay in this race. Having a chat there with Alexander Krieger, who's the German rider in the blue.
I think you'll be getting encouragement as well, Rob, won't he, from the other riders who they'll be aware when they go to the back that O'Connor's in a bit of a bad place mentally and physically, and they will have all been there themselves, maybe not in the biggest race in the world, but certainly at points in their career where things weren't going to plan, they were slightly injured, and sometimes all you need is some encouragement from your colleagues within the peloton. It can make all the difference. So I've seen a few people chatting to Ben O'Connor at the back, and I think sometimes it doesn't help just being at the back because everything feels a bit harder when you're right at the back of the main peloton. There's those more accelerations that you need to do, slightly less so on a course like today, but I think if he just got himself in and amongst his teammates or a bit further up, or even if his team just gave him a job to do for the day, I think that would help. If you haven't got anything to concentrate on and all you're thinking about is there's still got 111 k's to go, my pain in my legs is quite bad, and the pain in the other parts of my body where I've crashed is bad. It's just you've got nothing else to think about, whereas at least if you've just got a task to do or get the team to the front at this point in the race or something to concentrate on. Well, it's very easy for me to say, and it might just be that he just hasn't got the physical level right now with the injuries to be able to do that. But certainly if you go on, even if you don't have any physical ailments or after effects of a crash, if you have literally nothing to do for the stage, it makes it so much harder to get through it because you are just thinking about the pain and how far there is to go.
Oh, there's still 110.9 kilometres to go right now, but we're getting towards the top of our first classified climb of the day. Côte du Maraîcher. Côte des Rousses will be our next. That comes up in 25 k's time. And over the top of that climb, we then descend down into Switzerland to the canton of Vaud. Let's see what happens with the point here. It looks as though it's going to go to Frédéric Frison. He's the rider in the red and white, the Belgian rider from Geel. 29 years of age in his second Tour de France, but yet to win a professional bike race. In fact, 3 riders here from 3 different teams, 3 different nations, and there's 3 wins. But only 1 rider's got all of them. And Mattia Catania is the man who's won on 3 occasions in his pro career. There's Fred Wright, young man, and he's come close a few times. A really impressive last 18 months as Wright. Rider from the British capital, London. Especially Nata for Hooydonk. Always continuing to improve.
He's had some work to do, hasn't he, over the first week of this race, blimey.
If you look back to what he did in the classics as well, Jumbo-Visma really were the killer bees, weren't they, in their normal tops of yellow and black. Of course, they're in their change jerseys here with the work of art. But yeah, Van Hooydonk, off the back of that classics performance, was given a new contract, both he and Tish Benoot. And they've shown that they're wholly adaptable to the job here over 3 weeks too. just zapping away. Pedal stroke by pedal stroke at the advantage given to the breakaway. And of course, just maybe killing off any morale in there as well. They're not being given anything to play with, as is modern cycling. Christian Jensen's rather good at that as well behind, and Bike Exchange. They might not have got all the results they wanted so far, but they have ridden fantastically well. And in this attacking mode that I guess not having a GC challenge frees them up to do. They took the stage win with Dylan Groenewegen. They've been trying with Michael Matthews. Of course, Robbie McEwen getting confirmation from Matt White in the car that Michael Matthews did crash earlier on. And the lieutenant's behind, still plotting what might happen later. Jack Bauer smiling away as he has a chat to Luke Durbridge. And there's Tadej Pogačar at the back of the line of his riders. It was a busy day on the bike for him yesterday, and it's been a busy time off the bike as well. Daniel, Tadej Pogačar has just launched his own cancer research fund.
He has, yes, and he had new shoes to help promote that yesterday. So his fiancée, I believe it is now, Ursula Ziegart, who's a pro bike rider herself, the Bike Exchange women's team, who've been doing very well incidentally over at the Giro Donne. And very well in general, I've got to say, particularly in time trials so far this year. But yeah, with his fiancée, Ursula Ziegart, whose mother sadly passed away earlier on this year, they set up this Cancer Foundation. He had those new shoes to promote that yesterday. And we think that there were a number of reasons why he wanted to have his team working on the front and why he desperately wanted to win. Firstly, because his family were there at the finish line, but secondly, because he really wanted to promote this this new foundation. I think we had a tweet flash up earlier where you can find out more at pogacar.org. So POGACAR.org if you'd like to find out more.
Yep, I had the press release drop into the inbox this morning. www.pogacar.org, and in conjunction with his coach, actually, who is a research doctor, Inigo San Millán, doing plenty of research into the disease. Hello, Jonathan. Not seen you for a while. You've got a Pac-Man homage.
Well, I was just about to say, someone's done a Pac-Man. I mean, what are they doing? But there's no one for him to eat. And he hasn't got an eye. I mean, it's just that, unfortunately...
Well, it's not getting 10 then, is it?
No, I mean, it's not. I quite liked it. I would like to know what it was representing. Some form of agriculture from the area, I imagine.
It may, John, have been a tribute.
Conte cheese, I'm being told. Now, I do love Conte cheese.
No, it's a Pac-Man. It's definitely a Pac-Man.
Every good foodie knows that Conte is an essential part of your after-dinner cheese board. So, Conte, absolutely delicious. One of my favourites. But just...
I
don't know whether it's not. You don't put it on toast, Dan. Don't put it on toast. It's not like goat cheese. But it's just absolutely beautiful to eat. I just know that whenever I have Conte in the house, it's just one of those cheeses. It's so easy just to go to the. If you have a little cheese fridge, as I obviously do, you just go to the cheese fridge, just take it out.
In which wing of the mansion is that?
No, a cheese fridge is actually something you just keep. It's just a special caged box that you keep in a cooler part, a cooler cupboard, rather than putting it in the fridge, because a fridge is actually meant to take cheese down below the temperature that it's meant to go. So it's just keeping it cool whilst not making it over cool. Anyway, yeah,
in that respect, John, I'm not sure that in the UK we need a cheese fridge. We just need a cupboard.
Well, apart from at this time of year, I mean, you need a cellar. I think that's really what I'm essentially saying.
Well, I'm sticking with the Pac-Man, and the reason I say that is because in L'Equipe today, and I have to give credit to Andy McGrath for translating this, but Alexander Rousse in L'Equipe was talking about Pogačar on La Super Planche de Belleville yesterday and described him as a Pac-Man in yellow. Pogačar swallowed them up with the ease of a barfly putting away peanuts, hands dirty from all the success. So I think it's a tribute to our race leader.
I mean, and it may as well be, and what a wonderful little piece of writing that is to describe his performance. I do like that. Thank you very much, Dan. But I'm still going to say that it was a Conte cheese, because that's what I've been told by by our French director. So, I mean, I think he probably knows. And for those of you who have yet to try Conte, I get in there now because it seems to be going up in price on an almost weekly basis.
Jono, is Conte as good as Crumley Lancashire?
Oh, Rob. As much as there are many things I love about the county of your birth, I love the cricketers that they have produced, and I love everything to do with sport, and I obviously, as you know, have a huge soft spot for Blackburn Rovers. But when it comes to Lancashire cheese, I'm just going to stop talking.
That's a good point, because I think we're about to come back from an advert break. Thanks, Jono. Welcome back, everybody. Over the top of the first categorised climb of the day now. On our way to Switzerland today. First stage finish in Lausanne for 22 years. Eric Decker was our last winner there. Stage that started in France in Evian and finished just over the border. Of course, ever since we've been back. Last stage we had in Switzerland, won by Ilnur Zakarin, just the other side of the rest day that we had in Bern, and I remember that being a really hot weather affair. Sagan won into the Swiss capital in Bern. Have to go back to 2009 for the last stage before that, and Alberto Contador dancing away as he did to Verbier. Difficult climb up to what was a tremendous attacking stage finish. We've got a stage that goes through Switzerland for the majority tomorrow before finishing just over the border in France again. Proper mountain stage, that one. It goes over some of the famous climbs in the Tour de Romandie. And Lausanne, where we finished today. We've had so many final time trials, haven't we, in the Tour de Romandie. We'll have very familiar roads. And as I flagged right at the start of my little section, Lausanne is the headquarters of the Olympic movement. The IOC base there. We'll go past the Stade Olympique Pontaise, just beyond which we have today's finish. It's the Olympic stage of this year's 2022 Tour de France. Gaps down below 2 minutes now. They really are keeping this breakaway in check, Dan.
They are. Again, I'm still... It makes sense from Van Aert's point of view. If he's the only rider that you're riding for within your team, of course you would chase on a day like today. It suits him perfectly. But they're here for the general classification, and there's two parts to that. The first is that they're using a lot of energy, albeit with only one rider for the time being, that being Nathan van Hooydonk, second in line behind Chris Juul-Jensen here. Later on, they'll have to use more riders to set up Van Aert, and that's more energy used. But there's also the chance that that man in yellow on the left-hand side of your screen will also quite like this climb towards the end of today, and even if he doesn't win, has more chance of picking up some bonus seconds on the line than his closest rival on GC, Jonas Vingegaard of Team Jumbo-Visma. So it might only be a handful of seconds, but that might be what this Tour de France comes down to by the time we get to Paris. So there is that risk that in trying to set up the win for Van Aert and to pick up a load more points in the green jersey classification, that they hurt themselves in more ways than one when it comes to the general classification.
It's a difficult mentality to get into, though, isn't it, that, Dan? And probably one that if you're a team that believes in yourself, you don't want to get into that worried mentality. You can't stop racing, surely, because you're scared of somebody else taking those seconds and what have you. You have to go for it if you believe you can win. Maybe not.
Well, I mean, I think if they had 100% full belief, which of course they can't, but if they did have 100% belief in Jonas Vingegaard winning this Tour de France, I don't think they'd be riding today. And so from that point of view, maybe they're right to try and take out of the race what they can, knowing that Pogačar is the man to beat, and it might well be that they can't beat him by the end. So they'd like to come out with at least the green jersey, at least a couple of stage wins along the way, as well as a final podium position at the end. But he's proven how good he is very recently Jonas Vingegaard, and not least last year at the Tour de France, where he got second position even though he came in with no ambitions for himself in the GC. So yes, it's an interesting one. It's I can see why they would do it, but I could also see many reasons for not doing it today.
That's an interesting point of view. Back-to-back stages yesterday for Pogačar, just like they were last year. A couple of stage wins back-to-back then. Aiming maybe for a hat-trick then today. And again, you wouldn't bet against him, because the finale, again, for those of you who know Lausanne, it sort of climbs very quickly out of the lake, doesn't it? And those time trials that I talked about towards the end of Tour de Romandie editions in the last few years, well, they've had some really steep sections, and we have one of those sections in the penultimate kilometre today. A 9.5% average, 12% maximum ramp coming just after we go through under Pont Chaudron and heading up to that Olympic Stadium. And the last 5 Ks or so are all uphill. It's a serious finish. A third category climb, actually. 4.8 kilometres at 4.6%. It's vital statistics, but there's a middle kilometre that actually goes downhill, so that distorts the average somewhat. I think we heard earlier on, it is like Longwy all over again, perhaps. And as we know, certainly at this tour, no 2 stages are the same. Had the same winner the last 2 days, however. Will it be a hat-trick today? Certainly one thing to keep in mind. And 4 home riders to keep in mind today. We're going to Switzerland. One of those home riders is Stefan Küng of Groupama FDJ.
Well, we're entering Swiss territory. Lots of Swiss fans today. Is it special for you? Well, absolutely. It's a home game. I know the roads very well. A good friend lives in Lausanne, and I know where to launch the decisive attack. Interesting. I think the plan is to make the break, isn't it? But when's the point to launch that attack? I promise we'll only show this towards the end of the stage. Well, first of all, you need a bit of luck to make it into the break. Our team focus is on GC. That's why we're not going to put all of our effort into the break. But if I can make it, it's fine. And I hope for a very hard race to split the break quite early. But let's see.
Wenn ich dabei bin, dann ist gut, und dann hoffe ich auf ein sehr hartes Rennen, dass die Gruppe früh auseinander nimmt, und dann mal schauen.
Well, you have to hold back a bit, like the Roubaix stage, but today you're a little freer, I guess, and going into Switzerland is also, is that not a bit of a burden? Going into Switzerland, it's a chance to see family, my wife and our newborn at the finish. I've asked for a bit of freedom, as it gives me more motivation to push myself towards the end. If I can make it into the break, I'm going to give everything. Well, let's hope for a fast stage so you have more time for your family.
Stefan Küng there on home roads, approaching 100 kilometres to go, and he'll be crossing the border into his native land inside the next 20 Ks. I think the stage has worked out a little different following that crash, Dan, to what everybody seemed to be expecting from our various interviews you've had at the start. Most people, including you and Sean as well at the beginning, were talking big breakaway today, and Stefan Küng obviously thought that. He'd asked for that freedom. But it's going to be difficult to see him having a go here, isn't it, from this big group?
He'll find it difficult. He doesn't really have that punch. He's an incredibly strong rider in multiple disciplines. You know, time trial, he's come so close at the Tour de France before, but he has taken some big wins elsewhere. He's become a very good classics rider this year, and he became a GC rider, didn't he, at the Tour de Suisse that you were commentating on. But he still doesn't really have a sprint, and although there's a climb at the finish today, you still need that speed to finish it off with a win. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the difference would have been without that crash, because the way that Jumbo-Visma are riding now, they would have definitely had that plan in their heads before the start of the stage. So it might well have been that even if the attacks had continued a little bit longer, which they might well have done without the crash, that team would have still stamped their authority on the race and only allowed a small group to go up the road because they wanted to control it, bring it back and go for a Wout van Aert win towards the end. Or, as somebody's just suggested to me, maybe for a Primož Roglič win towards the end. Who knows?
Well, that would be a lovely story, certainly given the injury and problems and repeated bad luck. Again, he was up there yesterday, talked about his difficulty and the pain he felt. But again, he was certainly up there with the very best. For the moment, though, he's not the best placed man in his team. That's young Jonas Vingegaard, second overall at 35 seconds. So the first man to ever retain the lead on La Planche des Belles Filles. First man to win on 2 mountaintop finishes, the same one since Marco Pantani in the 90s. That mountain was Alpe d'Huez, for any of you wondering. Same summit finish, 95 and 97. And just a few days we'll be going to Alpe d'Huez. As the wind's blowing behind the riders here again. The last few days, actually, there have been quite a few tailwind sections. Maybe contributing a little to the ridiculously high speeds and early finishes we've been having. And today we're about on course for the average speed. 99.5 kilometers to go. The average speed today forecast at 43 kilometers per hour by our race organisers. And they're bang on it. 15:21 local time is where they were supposed to be passing through. 99.8 kilometers to go. It's the Col de la Savine, and that's where we are. Bang on time, and well, I suppose it could only be right, Dan, going into Swiss watchmaking country.
Although I was listening to the What's Occurring podcast about a week ago with Luke Rowe and Geraint Thomas, and they were saying that during the Tour de Suisse there was a day where they were trying to control the breakaway, they were looking to bring it back, and they were going a reasonably long climb at just a steady tempo, and the motorbike on the side kept on telling that the time gap had remained the same, about 3.5 minutes. And Luke was there thinking, well, I must have incredible legs today because I'm not really going hard at all, but we're still managing to peg the time gap to our breakaway. Then over the top, a new board came up, and it was 7.5 minutes. So he was criticising Swiss timing on that day. I think they managed to get it back in the end, but that job was much harder than it might have been.
Yeah, they're on a hard into nothing, though, aren't they? They can't make a mistake, Swiss timing. They're always going to be criticised. Just 4 Swiss riders in the peloton at this particular Tour de France. We just heard from one of them in Stefan Küng. We've seen one on the front of the bunch a few times in the last few days. Sylvain Dillier, the former national champion, rides for Alpecin de Koning in those blue jerseys. There's Stefan Bissiger, who crashed on a couple of occasions in the opening time trial. Rider wearing the pink of EF Education Easy Post. And the fourth and final Swiss rider in this year's Tour de France peloton is Marc Hirschi. Last yesterday, 22 minutes down on La Planche des Belles Filles, and hasn't been looking in his best form, it has to be said. But he's there, just a couple of riders in front of Tadej Pogačar, and could yet play a very, very important role in this Tour de France. Certainly now with a man down, Vegard Starkelongen, having gone home with COVID. All our best to him. And to Geoffrey Bouchard, who was the other rider who contracted COVID and was unable to start today. Bouchard, former king of the mountains in the Giro d'Italia and the Vuelta a España. He's making his Tour de France debut this year for AG Desert. Peloton heading south, and still the gap continues to move south. 1 minute and 44 now. Was as high as over 3 minutes. Just, what are we talking? 30 kilometers or so ago. Only 2 riders riding, and they're doing a sterling job. The blue at the front there, just with his hand in his back pocket. As we get another cycling biathlon connection, that's Quentin Fillon-Meillet. He's in the car today as a guest of the organisers ASO with Christian Prudhomme, the current Olympic champion in biathlon. And of course today we're going to the Olympic city of Lausanne, aren't we? Home of the Olympic movement. France in the last few years has produced some tremendous biathletes, actually. Quite a few who've spent time training on their bikes. Good friends with the likes of Pinot and Bardet and Alaphilippe. And it's becoming an increasingly big thing for quite a lot of French riders in particular to do their cross-training in the winter, doing cross-country skiing, Dan.
I didn't know that. I mean, it has been used by quite a few riders in recent years as an off-season training. And I know Heinrich Hausler many years ago, before his 2009 season, which was definitely the best he ever had as a pro rider, he did a lot of cross-country skiing at altitude over the winter. Everald Bosenhagen does a fair bit, I think, as well. I mean, a lot of riders will have it in their contract that they're not allowed to do skiing because of the potential for injury over the off-season. But if you've grown up doing it, or if you're very experienced, it's a fantastic sport to keep your fitness up. I mean, we all know how those biathletes perform in physiological tests and VO2 max, etc. It's something that uses your whole body, and if you're at altitude as well, and as I said, if you're confident at skiing, it's a good thing to do over the winter months. But yeah, I didn't know that about the French riders.
Yeah, quite a few have been having a dabble in it in the last few years. Certainly before COVID, it was quite a big thing. I know that since cyclocross has come into the headlines, a lot just simply like going out for a run nowadays, even during the season. And this, Jonathan, is the Saint-Michel Church in Morbier.
Yes, it is. The description in the notes is quite fantastic. It just says it's a massive parish church with 2 steeples, which I think everyone could see. It houses an 8-metre-high comptoir's clock, as well as a painting and wooden Christ listed as a historical monument. And then they start to talk a little more about Comté, which we've already had quite a long discussion about.
There's no mention of cheese, was there?
For those who were missing out on that conversation about Comté cheese a little earlier, think Pac-Man but in cheese form.
Very nice. Beautiful scenic roads in the Jura today. Alexis Vuillermo at home in the last couple of days, certainly today on the start. Of course, the Jura is a region that extends over both France and Switzerland. And we're in both sides of it today. Heading over the hill, but not too far away. Finishing down by the lake in Lausanne. Tomorrow we'll go past UCI headquarters, so we're certainly shaking hands, at least metaphorically, with all the sports federations in the next couple of days. Olympic Committee today at Lausanne, and just down the road in Aigle tomorrow, it'll be the turn of the International Cycling Union, the UCI. You might notice every day that every time we go through kilometre 92, there's a huge banner. It's because of one of the race's sponsors. And the Hauts-de-Seine region, which is the region that's just beyond Paris, just the region encircling Paris. Basically 92 is its postcode. And they're sponsoring the Tour de France this year. Didn't realise there was a tourist board for the outskirts of Paris, but there you go. This is Morez. Or Dan, depending on local pronunciation, Morez. Exactly. You and I have had a chat or two in the last few days. For those of you who don't know France too well, the pronunciation of certain letters at the end of words, Z's and S's, can often depend on the region that you're in and who you speak to. Of course, we found out in the last few days, despite a few of our French colleagues pronouncing Alexis Vuillermo's name as Vuillermo's, which we're led to think was the correct one. We found a video of him saying his own name, finally. And it's Vuillermo. You'll be happy to know. Not too much doubt about Cattaneo. And here he is. Seems to have found a good home in Quick Step Alpha Vinyl. Was around a few teams, was at Lampre for a while. Of course, in Quick Step, I guess one thing is you're always going to get your opportunities to do stuff like this, Dan. It's that sort of team.
Yeah, it's not a team where you're held back particularly often, is it? Unless you have to ride for a sprint finish for Jakobsen or Cavendish or whoever they're sprinting for that day. So it is a good team for him, and it's been, I'd say, a similar one for Fausto Masnada, although we haven't seen too much of him so far this season. A fellow Italian who joined the squad as well a couple of years back. It's a mid-season transfer, I seem to remember, but yeah, it's a good home for Catania. He's a solid rider, isn't he?
Mm. On to our second classified climb of the day. It's the Côte de Rousse, 6.7 kilometres long. Oh dear. I mean, we want you all to watch the GCN Plus and the Discovery Plus app, but make sure you're tied down before you get it out on the rock face there. Hope the signal's good enough as well. Even up there, you don't want to miss a pedal stroke. As Verhooydonk continues to put down the pedal strokes. Christian Jensen still with him. And behind UAE are just sitting there. They have not been contributing today. Well, let's rewind to this morning. Matt Stevens had breakfast with someone else today. Today, someone rather special.
Tadej Pogacar, big question, everybody's asking, what did you have for breakfast?
Okay, so I had porridge with fruit and honey. Then I had omelette, like sandwich, good omelette with peanut butter and prosciutto. And then pancakes.
Pancakes. What about coffee strategy?
Coffee, no coffee.
No coffee?
Yeah.
The man's on fire though. Good luck.
I wait for coffee when I retire.
Okay, ciao.
Hang on a minute. 2 days running, 2 cyclists and no coffee? Have I missed a meeting?
I wonder if he has caffeine gels or if he steers clear of
Just say I'm going to make up my own Tour de France cookbook. Thank you very much, Mr. Harris-Bass. And I don't even know who you are. But I don't know what to say about that. I don't. It's a little bit like making a grand pronouncement that the British do better to potatoes than the French. It's just it's a day that's upsetting me. It really is.
On that note, welcome back to Carlton Kirby.
I'd just like to say that Sean agrees with me. He's actually lingering here. French fries, Sean. I would like an opinion quickly.
I think French fries are brilliant.
Oh, what?
Brilliant.
Do you know what?
Before I leave you, can I just drop this one? What about
under a bus
are
here.
they not better in Belgium?
Oh dear. He said yes, they are better in Belgium, and of course apparently he's got his favourite chip shop back in Carrick-on-Suir, which is even better than anywhere else on the planet. But anyway, we'll be hearing more from Sean later. Thanks for that, mate. Oh dear. Well, yes, poor old John has apparently has made a list of different potatoes which are far from the top shelf. Let's put it that way. Meanwhile, it's a quiet one at the moment. Do you know what? I'm wondering who I'm with. Dan, are you still with me at the moment?
I am still with you. And Robin McEwen has just joined alongside me too.
Hello, Carlton. We walked in at the same time.
Hello, mate. How are you? Oh, we've sat from frantic days, and this is not one of them. I think we all deserved a rest after yesterday's madness, didn't we?
I think most people, including the spectators, I mean, obviously the riders could use one, but they don't get one. But I think everybody needed a little bit of a calming day. That's why I think it's been really good having Rob and Dan just sort of floating through with John and just enjoying the wonderful scenery. I'm going to go silent for 5 seconds and
Please
admire.
Do. Yeah, this is the Fort de Rousse. And, of course, à la Rousse means starter, main course, and then a sweet dessert, as was of the Russian court, as John will tell us.
I mean, are you just making language up again, Carlton?
No,
or is this
that is
genuine?
actually true.
But à la Russe is, as far as I know from my time, it just means Russian.
Yes, exactly, and it was that form, because they used to start off with sweet things on occasion. Sometimes you get something sweet, and they formalised it, the Russian court, and said, no, we're going to have a starter, we're going to have a larger main course, and then we're going to finish with something sweet, and that's when it says à la Russe.
So every time that we eat a meal which contains 3 courses, we're actually just eating like the Russians.
Correct.
We should give them more deference towards that, perhaps.
I don't know. Anyway, don't really want to go there.
Le Fort des Russes actually also named General Henry Martin Fort since 1984 that we just saw, and it was stunningly beautiful, set in amongst all of those pine trees. Yeah, and that has some beautiful vaulted cellars, because that is a place where they mature the Comté that we saw in rather oversized form in the Pac-Man homage that we were admiring earlier.
Do you know what? If I'd have said it was Pac-Man and then I'd said, no, it's Conte, you wouldn't have let me forget it. But due to your credentials, we're going to let you off. Besmirching this fine cheese, which apparently is I think it's the most produced cheese in France, if I'm not mistaken, by weight. Always like things by weight. In terms of commentary team, when I'm on, you get more for your money by weight. That's all. 3.9 kilometres until we get to the top of this, Robbie. We're finally climbing. It's taking us up to a plateau. Now, when we deal with this, in fact, we've got a little, we've got a range of about must be about 55 kilometres, something like that, which will take us to another slight knoll and then a long downhill series of runs, largely descending to our final kicker today. So I'm expecting us to get to the top of this plateau, and then things begin to warm up before our penultimate climb, and then that long downhill dash for our final test around Lausanne. I think this could turn out to be a bit more of a firework display than we've had so far.
Well, Carlton, you're absolutely right in what you say about the course and the way it's likely to go from here. And this morning, I went in our tips competition that we run amongst ourselves on the Breakaway show. I actually went with Wout van Aert because I was a believer in it all coming back together for a big finale into Lausanne. And it's still not a done deal, though. I mean, that is a tough climb, irregular, open to a lot of attacking, which he could also do, I suppose. Wout van Aert, he could go on the attack and win it and not wait for a sprint. But Michael Matthews was the man in mind, and I have to admit of being worded up on how they were going to ride it. This looks a bit sore, doesn't it?
It certainly does. You know when your mum pulls the plaster off when you're a kid? He coped a lot better than I ever did. That looked very nasty. He's come back for another bit of gauze. This is from our crash earlier on today, Robbie, and it was a significant one. And a few, including Quintana, went down. Of course, Pogacar was down on the deck as well, which proves that luck is very much part of any Tour de France campaign, doesn't it?
Well, luckily for Pogacar, he didn't actually hit the deck. He was in the middle of it, but he stayed upright. He clipped out and stood there and waited for the carnage to clear from around him, but he didn't actually hit the deck. But of course, Uran did. Peter Sagan also did. Quintana, Michael Matthews was another one to go down. He's been promised a new pair of shorts for tomorrow by his team director Matthew White.
I saw that.
I don't know if the proviso is on that
of sartorial elegance fretting. Is that what that's about?
I don't know if Whitey said to Michael Matthews, "I'll give you a new pair of shorts if you win," or "I'll just give you a new pair of shorts." But yeah, they saw the light side of it. He's unhurt, so that was the good news for him. So he'll carry on and try and win the stage, and they're right behind it. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at it, as Whitey said.
I've got a feeling that's how this one's going to pan out. It's hovering around about 2 minutes at the moment. They've not been given too much leash today, our break, despite the fact there's only 3 of them in it. I think it's a mark, really, of just how many teams still want to get something out of this race, Robbie. Pickings have been a bit thin because Pogacar and his boys have generally been quite greedy.
Well, he's won what he's been capable of winning, and I don't expect any less. And I I'm not a subscriber to that, I guess, call it the attitude of the French sports paper, L'Equipe, saying that he's a greedy glutton in the cafeteria of the Tour de France. I don't think he should be trying to give away victories, because it then becomes a little bit hollow for someone else. I mean, yes, Kemna deserved to win yesterday, and yes, Vingegaard deserved to win yesterday. They both rode incredibly well, but Pogačar was the strongest, and his team rode all day, and he had a number of reasons that he did want to win the stage, and I don't think anybody should begrudge him the stage glory and everything that comes with that. But as the Tour goes on, going back to the point of how this stage is looking like it may pan out, that they're going to catch this break, and we're going to see the likes of Van Aert and Matthews, see if they can go with the climbers up past the Stade Olympique and fight it out at the finish. It's in this Tour, as we've seen, very, very few flat stages suited to the sprinters. Jakobsen's won one, Groenewegen's won one. Probably the next one will come in Paris. I think that's pretty much a lock. There's another outside chance of one, I think, was it in Carcassonne?
Possibly, yeah.
And
day
maybe,
before the final rest day.
Yeah, in Carcassonne, possibly, and maybe one in Cahors, but they're also quite lumpy days. So that they're definitely no easy sort of roll in, and you wouldn't go and put your money on it being a bunch sprint on those days. So 3 bunch sprints in the Tour, then plenty of big mountain stages and summit finishes. So what have you got left? You've got a few stages left, like today's into Lausanne, with a climb up to the finish, a little bit like we had into Longwy. Okay, that was won by Pogačar as well. But there's not a lot on offer unless you're a pure climber or aiming at the final time trial. Basically, the sprints are 2/3 done in this Tour de France. So what are the rest going to do? You can't just sit back, let a break go and say, oh, well, that's that then. You've got to, front up, chase it, make the most of every opportunity, because there just aren't many. And that's exactly now what Bike Exchange are doing. And the good news for them is that Jumbo-Visma, although they're trying to ride for the overall and win the overall Tour, they are doing what's needed for Wout van Aert, and I like that.
Just as we come around this left-hander, the wind is going to change. As you can see, at the moment it's a crosswind. It's going to be straight in their faces. It's a north-northeasterly today. We make a turn, and it started to be a little stiffer than was predicted at this time of the day. It was supposed to be about 8 to 9 kilometres per hour. As you see, 13. It may well indeed still hold on to a bit more than that when we come out of the tree line. But it's been gusting up to about 18 kilometres per hour. Now, it's going to be, according to the windometer at the moment, a block headwind by the time they finish this climb. Now, when they will then have a long old reach along the open plateau, and that's the 50 kilometres or so that I was telling you about that they're going to have to deal with between the 2 climbs. In fact, I need to just amend that very, very slightly for you. Yeah, about 40 kilometres, in fact, it will be. That's going to be wearing. The penultimate climb, which is the Côte de Petra Felix, once you get over the top of that, it's a downhill run, largely, with a few kickers within it, until we almost get to the foot of our final climb today. So it's going to garner some action, that is for sure. And just as Robbie was pointing out, very few sprinter stages up for grabs. And you mentioned Cahors, a lumpy day, but before the individual time trial and before the sort of parade, if it turns out to be that, we shall wait and see. Stage 21 at the Champs-Élysées, which will turn out to be one for the sprinters, of course. But that Cahors stage could be incredibly chaotic. And the reason is because everyone goes, they're against the clock the following day as individuals, Robbie. But when they're running, so for Cahors, you can kind of go all in if you're not a time trialist and your race is already virtually completed. You've got nobody supporting a time trial, and if stage 21 is basically going to be for the sprinters, then just empty your bags and go for it in the run to Cahors. So that knocks out another sprinter stage because everyone's going to be in for that one.
Yeah, it will be one of those really chaotic days, everyone trying to get in the break. I mean, the riders will, of course, be exhausted. And effectively, for more than 90% of the peloton, it's their last race day because it's the last realistic chance of winning.
Exactly. Exactly that. So when you look at this, what I'm trying to say, a long-winded way of doing it, when you come and
we
look
got all day.
Yeah, well, we've got a king of the mountains here, actually, which we should honour, but they are going to be rolling through this one by the looks of it as part of an accord, because there's a man, Magnus Cort, who's leading this competition by a very handsome margin, and these guys, I very much doubt, have got that as part of their target. But yeah, when you look at the Tour de France profile, it's really difficult, Robbie, to know which days are going to turn out to be the absolute classics. And on occasion, you get an absolute belter that comes from slightly left field. I mean, who would have thought that Vlasov would struggle as he did yesterday? He's clearly been down. As you can see, he's carrying a little bit of gauze, both on his right-hand side, so he looks like he's Superman on the right-hand side down the road, unfortunately for him. But he struggled, and many other good GC men did as well. And we didn't really see that coming, or indeed predictions of when the breakaway was going to get caught. Who'd have thought it would have been, 65 metres from the line, Robbie?
Yeah, well, I didn't think he was going to get caught. I thought he had done just enough to hang on, but as we said earlier in the breakaway show pre-race, that last 100 metres reared up and kicked him in the face, poor old Leonard Kemner. He did a phenomenal ride for a pretty slender gap at the bottom of the climb to get so close. I mean, you're always, of course, dependent on how it's being ridden in the peloton. There were no big attacks. There were no huge accelerations to try and split the field. It was tempo setting by UAE, and that was in the favour then of Leonard Kemner, and he got so close. And I was under the impression, even coming in the run to the line, that Tadej Pogačar was, for a moment, not so focused on Kemner, but just doing enough to make sure he wasn't going to be attacked from behind, that no one's going to surprise him. And then Vingegaard did from quite a long way out, considering how steep that final ramp was. If Vingegaard hadn't gone, yeah, maybe they still would have caught Kemner, but it would have been even closer if Vingegaard had just stayed in the wheel of Pogačar. But what a nail-biter of a finish.
It was
we
amazing.
sold it 3 times.
And the rest, amazing. Right, here we go. They're going to roll over it, and so it's an accord between these guys, and you can see from their demeanour, especially when they go back to the car, very little joy and very little kind of let's say frisson coming out of the cars to say, come on, go for it. I think there's an understanding from these guys, Adam Blythe, who joins us now, that basically they're on a hiding to nothing by the looks of things. 1:46, there's too much at stake. There's lots of teams who want to get something out of this race, and they haven't so far.
There is indeed, and there's one man especially who wants to get something out of it, and that is Wout van Aert. He's, I think after yesterday's, 2 days ago when he went in the breakaways, tried for that stage win. Looking ahead to today, he's probably thinking, you know what, this suits me down to the ground, and I lost out the other day, so let's have another go again today. It is almost suited perfectly for him, I can imagine, as well in this final today.
We were banging on, weren't we, guys, about the 3 third places, and then all of a sudden he pops up and takes the win. It was already in yellow, of course, Adam, and yeah, why shouldn't it be a second stage win for him?
Well, it should be, really. I mean, 3 second places. It feels like a long time ago now, but 3 second places, a win, and then that long breakaway. That was so impressive. I spoke to Luke Rowe about that from Ineos Grenadiers, and I said, how was it with Wout? And he was just like, he's making us look like juniors. It's like an under-23 drop back down into the junior ranks, and he was on bigger gears. They were all on junior gears. And the most amazing thing I find with Wout van Aert is just how easy he makes it all look. When you get those side-on pictures of him riding along when he was solo that day, you just have no gauge how quickly he's going.
Did you notice his position on the bike too? There was a photo, a profile shot when it was just him and Quinn Simmons left over, and the position on the bike, naturally he's just so low down, almost in a time trouble. Flat back, he's so aero, but he's so fluid on the bike, and as you said, he makes it look ridiculously easy. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, I think
but beautiful.
The one funny that's true. The one funny thing is you can only get that gauge when you go back to the peloton, and it's over a 20-minute period when you see 2 guys come to the front. They do 10k, so they do roughly 5k each, and then they're gone. And then they have to get another 2 fresh guys up. They have to do another 10k. They can't reduce the gap again. So, I mean, it'd be hard not to go for him today, but it's the Tour de France. There's going to be a lot of dangers. As you said, Carlton, there's going to be a lot of riders as well who haven't got anything out of this Tour de France so far, so we might see some attacks coming into the finish. It is quite a hard finish.
It's true, Adam. And not only that, as well, you've got riders who are suddenly off duty, and one of those is Matej Mohoric. I think that's Sean Kelly's pick for today, now that Jack Haig is no longer part of proceedings. So lots of things opening up for us today. Well, here we are. It's the Collège de Rochat. What do they study here, John?
Well, it's a high school, and here they learn to do Nordic or alpine skiing sports, especially. That's their specialist subjects there at the Rochat College.
Yes, it wasn't the prettiest of buildings, I must say, but there you go. I'm known for my criticism of the architecture, generally speaking. I'm a bit old school when it comes to, out in the hills. I think it should be
typewriters who are trying to limit losses and just keep themselves in it. They're going to have to be spending on that final climb. You must. It's a summit finish, and there's no choice.
Pogačar could possibly nick a few bonus seconds on the line today. It's sort of that finish where he will be knocking about up there, and if he finds himself in the correct spot, it's Pogačar. He could get on the podium.
Yeah, he's got a handy sprint. We saw that in Longwy, the way he jumped away. And Michael Matthews, he got himself out a position. He let Pidcock in, and then he got swamped when Roglic came around. But even when Matthews did work his way out and he went, the gap stayed the same.
Yeah.
Pogačar is rapid.
Yeah, he is indeed.
Well, you know what? I've even seen the likes of Geraint Thomas go long range on a long descending day such as this, if he's technically got it all mapped out in his mind. And occasionally I'll just look and see what the bookmakers are thinking, and they thought 150 to 1 for Geraint Thomas today, which seemed, well, on a day, frankly, I'm just sort of ripping up the form book quite often because you just never know. Yesterday we were convinced that the breakaway would get caught, and, well, it almost delivered, didn't it? Well, let's see if Pogačar can do it. So can perhaps some of the other GC men. We're going to find out. We're also going to find that we are joined by our friends from Linear in a few moments' time. And then we're going to be out away from the trees and into the wind by the looks of things. And these guys, well, Catania taking the maximum points out of that Category 3 test. And it looks like we've got the high lake of the Lac de Rousse, which we'll be hearing from in a few moments' time. Once we're back together as a family. Welcome back, everyone. Lac de Rousse, and we'll have Alexander Vlasov in a few moments' time, which means that we've got just enough time to find out about this lac. Is it a reservoir, John? It looks like one.
It is actually a lake. It's the only remaining lake in this region, which is the Franche-Comté region. So it's a part of past glacial activity. So there was a glacial lock up here that was gradually filled by sedimentary deposits. The lake permanently fed by streams, runoffs and snowmelt, and sort of it looks like a reservoir by dint of the fact that it's sort of got little what looks like man-made beaches, but actually that's just the sediment that's been deposited there. Very, very popular in the summer, they say, and yet I can't see a single soul around it at the moment. Well, I think there might be a little solitary man out on a boat, but other than that, it looks as though it's not massively popular.
Well, so maybe they're tucking into their raclette. I'm not sure.
Doesn't look particularly beachy.
No, it doesn't. It looks a bit marshy. So filled by snow melt and indeed other things as well. We've just had a few comfort breaks. Wout van Aert is indeed just getting himself back in. No technical for him. It was just a rest. 79.9 kilometres to go. And we have Alexander Vlasov about to speak to us. 3-2-1 Vlasov, we have been saying on occasion. But at the moment, he's stuck on the launch pad. When's he going to go? Let's find out.
Alex Vlasov is still all smiles. You're one of the riders who lost some time yesterday, but can you give us an explanation what happened and how you're feeling?
I had a lot of pain after the crash, of course, and I just tried to, the rhythm was very high, and I just tried to keep my rhythm, which I can ride more or less, and try to lose as less as possible. And
but at the same time, you still smile. You're always like in a good mood. It's like, is it not where you have moments? It's like, why this happened?
I'm just waiting when I will feel better, and I try to take some days easy to recover my body and lick my wounds, and I hope I will come back on the same level as other GC competitors.
We wish you all the best. 2 more days, then a rest day.
Thank you.
Fortitude, Adam, that's what you need as part of your backpack of skills set when you're a cyclist. You need to be able to just forget about the bad things and get on with the good things, and some riders display that ability far better than others.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I think the main thing is with that is always trying to stay positive, but if you've got pain still after a crash, no matter how much you believe, if that pain's still there, you can't just make it disappear with your thoughts. But it's good to see Vlasov there with a positive mentality and just, you know, look into the rest of this race to try and find that form he had. It's not disappeared. He's just got injuries that are, yeah, making life difficult for him at the minute. But I hope to see him back, because he's been on fine form, and just to see him, you know, animate the race in the mountains a little bit be fantastic to see. But we can see now the difference between Wout van Aert going for it today as a leader of the race as he was in that first week. There's no one there that stopped with him to bring him back onto the cars. He's left to do it on his own. It's very much, yes, Wout, we'll give you this opportunity today because we know it's good for you, but we're not going to start sending guys back for you because we need to start saving everyone now. This is a long race. We're only just into the second week, and that third week of the Tour, it's a big one. So we need to just preserve the guys as well as we can.
And it's one of those things, isn't it, Adam? Coming back from a nature stop like Wout van Aert just did, it's often easier just to come back on your own through the cars. Because when you get on the wheel of a teammate, you're actually sitting further out of the slipstream of the cars. So you might as well just do it yourself. Here's Primož Roglic. He's also had a drop back. And just talking about Vlasov, well, you can take a leaf out of Roglic's book about resilience and coming back after a crash, because Primož Roglic has talked a lot yesterday post-stage about the amount of pain that he's suffering. And his teammates have been talking about it in the press. Well, they're not hiding it. He's in extreme pain. He says like a knife in the back every time, with every pedal stroke, I think was his quote. Yeah,
exactly.
Tough.
There's one thing just to mention to everyone as well. If you're just watching cycling for the first time, Wout van Aert then, who was in the green jersey from Jumbo Visma, he did stop for a wee, but he didn't actually stop. The riders like to wee while they're rolling along on the bikes. Not a lot of riders can do it, but it obviously saves you from stopping, having to get that acceleration. If you can do it by the time, if you start your wee at the front of the peloton, you freewheel, by the time you get to the back, you're not going to be a million miles behind, which makes that effort easier, getting back onto the peloton.
And the hope is there isn't a crosswind for some of those who are riding with you.
Yeah, well, if you do it twice a day, every stage of the Tour, take out the, say, 2 time trials, that's 19 days. You've saved yourself 38 chases back onto the peloton.
Exactly. Yeah, it all adds up. Robbie, just going back to that fortitude thing, there are some riders who and through no fault of their own, it's just their makeup, their personality. When they get a knockback, whether it's physical or mental, it takes them an awful long time to refine themselves and refocus and get back into the zone. And someone like Roglic just seems to be able to reboot himself and pick himself back up. I guess perhaps it comes from taking so many tumbles as a ski jumper, for goodness sake. You know, that is one of the most injury-prone sports on the planet. So he's able to park it up and get on with the job, and I admire him so much for that.
There maybe is something to it that you know, people who crash a little bit more have more experience in pushing on through it and coming
100%.
back. And once you've done it, and you prove to yourself that you can do it, you know the next time it happens, you say, I got this. Yes, it hurts. But if you're someone who doesn't crash much, I can imagine it really gets in your head.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the king of that, and this is in a nice way, Geraint, is Geraint Thomas. He's rode the Tour. Froome, yeah. I think it was Geraint a few years ago, rode the Tour with a cracked pelvis and got through it. I mean, cracked pelvis, I could barely walk down the stairs to the kitchen.
Dan Martin, that crash with Richie Porte down the Mont du Chat a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
He had a broken one.
Cadel Evans with a broken elbow finished the Tour.
I had 2 fractures in my back in 2004 in the Tour. But it's the Tour. It's the one race where you'll try to stay in. No matter how bad it hurts, you'll try to stay in. Any other race, you'd just go straight home.
Let's move away from crashes and cycling's hard men.
To cycling soft men.
To cycling soft men. Here I am. You're speaking to me. I'm back.
Oh dear. Well, if you give me a poke, There's none softer than me in the commentary position. But
Robbie is quite
well,
right,
anyway.
though, there, Carlton, is that I wasn't used to crashing. I only crashed 7 times in my whole career, so when I did crash, there's a time when I was out with Ian Stannard training once. He's going to kill me for telling this story. We spent a week in Mallorca, and we were motor pacing in the last hour of this, like, 6-hour ride, and there was bottles on the motorbike and 2 wheels on each side of this motorbike, and it was in the middle. Ian tried to get it in. He was on a protein set day, so didn't have much food. Reached into it, got his handlebars caught in the middle of the spare wheels on the motorbike, came down. I was behind him, and I was rolling on the floor. I was screaming. I didn't get up quickly, and I just had like a paper cut on my arm. Ian jumped up like Bugs Bunny, just straight up out of a blooming Jack-in-a-Box, and his knee was open, but he was open for months and months on end. And Ian's a hard man. He's used to crashing. Me with a paper cut on the other hand, I was like, oh, Ian, you've done me in here. So, yeah, there is definitely the guys that are used to crashing and a lot more
Well, they
tougher.
say there are 2 kinds of riders. There are those who've been down, and there are those who are going down. Yeah, better get used to it, guys. Just one last thing on this, and it will be the last thing. Jose, I think it was Serpa, Jose Rodolfo Serpa, at the Tour of Langkawi, I remember, in 2007, something like that. We're in Malaysia, and I'm sure it was him. He said, it's only bad bike handlers who fall down.
Oh, no.
I've never had a crash in my life. Next day, boom.
Yeah.
He must be God.
He invited it. He opened the door and said, come on in and get me. The workload, Bike Exchange.
But, if it wasn't Jose, then I apologise.
Look at Bike Exchange, the bulk of the work, 49%, but sharing it along with Jumbo-Visma. The surprise for me is that UAE are actually contributing throughout the day, less and less, but that they have been contributing. So maybe that's the sort of the justification for later on for Pogacar trying to go for the win. He's had that little bit of, I guess you call it, criticism in L'Equipe, the French newspaper, saying that he's too greedy. Well, he's not going to get up and sprint and potentially win a stage without his team doing any of the work. So if they say it again, he can say, well, I put my team to work, we chased the race, I rode the race is there to be won, I'm a bike racer, voila. And I think they've got to stop it.
I think they have as well.
Imagine, Carlton, if it was Romain Bardet who'd already won a couple of stages. I wonder what the rhetoric would be in their paper then. What would be the narrative?
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, the press, and dare I say it, during the Tour de France, the French press have kind of picked their targets occasionally. And Chris Froome was very, very much a victim of that. I won't go into the whys and wherefores and the rudiments of what he suffered, but it was quite a lot of abuse, let's put it that way. And it wasn't nice. But it's been a long time since and we're still waiting, actually, in this year's race for a French winner as well.
We are.
And it is it's a beautiful country. It's a stunning place, and I'm extraordinarily strong, a huge fan, and have a great deal of affection for the French people and the French nation. It's been my home for a long, long time. My work, of course, has been based as part of a French company for an awful long time as well. And I've got many wonderful French friends, but when the tour comes, there's a little sense of mild madness that falls over everybody, and it's a sense of desperation. They need to have a French winner. I thought it was going to be Alaphilippe a few years ago, even though it was done by a tempest in Tignes. It would have been wonderful. I think then everything would have calmed down. It would have been beautiful, and we could have all just moved on. But I don't know. It's like the Brits who waited a long time for a Wimbledon winner. No, we're not so urgent. But hey, 73. Oh, hello.
Queen Simmons.
Every time this happens, Robbie, it's going to be a niggle, isn't it? Doesn't matter how minor it is, and you just got to get on with it.
Yeah, but this isn't too bad. That's under control. Back into the cars. I mentioned this the other day. Interesting from Trek Segafredo. They're riding with of course, with disc brakes with the through axle, but they're choosing just to use it's actually a detachable skewer handle on it. So they're winding it out manually by hand instead of like sometimes jumping out with the power drill with an Allen bit attached to it in the chuck and drilling it out F1 style with all the theatrics that come along with it. They're just going manual as we cross the border into Switzerland.
No passports required. Yeah, it's not called a Clé d'Alain, but I wish it was. I think they call it an hexagon over here. John will tell me in a moment. They've rolled through. We're on this plateau. We're just about to come out from the protection of the trees, and we'll see what the wind's doing. John, what is an Allen key called in French?
You see, you stumped me there. And
I'm going with Clé d'Alain.
I think the official term for it is Allen key.
The thing is, if you type it into Google Translate, it comes up with Clé d'Alain. But I do not believe that for a single second. I really don't. It is something like that. I'm sure when I used to use them, when I used to
I think it's
go to IKEA and attempt to assemble their furniture, I'm fairly sure it was called an hexagon. That rings a lot of bells.
Of course, the map of France is known as l'Hexagon as well. We're out of it at the moment. We're in Switzerland. It's the third foreign country we have dealt with. Of course, we had Denmark, spectacularly so. A wonderful start to the tour, beautiful one. Dipped into Belgium, of course, as you know, and now we're dipping into Switzerland, home of the cuckoo clock. Nice chocolate, plenty of other things as well. It's a long list. I've only mentioned 2. 71 kilometres to go. A minute. Adam, that's all they've got. When is the heart of this break going to be broken?
Hopefully not, because I pick Cataneo to win today, so hopefully these lot just back off for a little bit and give Cataneo a chance just for my predictor in the breakaway show that we have. But I mean, it's not going to be long. I think they've closed this gap down. We know that the final 40 kilometres of today's stage, apart from the last 4, is downhill, which the last 4 is obviously uphill towards the finish line, but with a tailwind rolling downhill, cross tailwind, it's going to be fast and furious. So if they don't get it back with that 40 k's to go, it's going to be harder and harder to catch. So, you know, just keeping them where they are is fine. I don't think there's any urgency to ride them. I think that 50k to go, as long as they're around 40, 35 seconds, they should be fine. But I am very intrigued to see what that man in yellow can do today.
I'm intrigued to find out who's going to win at all. Michael Matthews has certainly got a good chance, and he's being brought up on the left-hand side of the road, Robbie.
Yep, it's going to be a case of more urgency as the race goes on. A shot of Caleb Ewan had a tough tour, little mechanical on stage 2, which bent his derailleur, which meant his chain was skipping, wasn't able to sprint against Fabio Jakobsen, who won that day. The next bunch sprint, Caleb tried to dive through the gap on the right-hand side, but it closed before he got there, so didn't get a run at it. He's had a frustrating season. In fact, missed Milano-San Remo due to illness. He had that nasty crash on stage 1 in the Giro, got pipped on the line by Arnaud Demar on stage 6, so no stage win in the Giro for Caleb. Came into this race looking on really, really good form, but just purely lack of bunch sprints in this tour is surely a frustration for any sprinters who haven't won, even for those who have. They'd like to get another chance at it. But today, I think normally it's just a little bit too hard for Caleb, but I thought that on stage 1 of the Giro, and he was right there in the wheels of Biniam Gourmet and Mathieu van der Poel until he fell off. But he was right there, so never say never, but I think it's just a little bit too much. Quite a tough climb up to the finish today.
Here we go.
Yeah, bit of pace.
They've started to push on now. Just as a peloton, if we notice there, the riders at the back that we saw, they just started to ease up a little bit. So let's not forget the directors have got the headphones in. This is the probably bit where they chat now and say, here we go, look, Cataneo just going, yeah, come on, let's give it a little go now, boys. It's time that we crack on with this. And it's the perfect time. He'll have got that information through his ear from his team director, say, the peloton's starting to stop for a wee. This is the final break they'll have. And this is the point where they've gone, right, boom, we need to go. The last 40k downhill, we've got roughly 70k's of flat to go, and then we're downhill to the finish. So why not now? Is sooner rather than later.
This is that sort of moment that sorry, Carlton, we'd see a colleague of ours at Eurosport in France, Jackie Durand, was the master of this. Knowing that you're at the mercy of the chase of the peloton, they got the power in numbers, so you can't just outmuscle them all day long, but you've got to go at your tempo, see what the peloton's doing, but at a certain moment you've got to say, this is it, this is the moment to go, and you try and re-extend that gap a little bit. And try and fight them off all the way to the finish. And around that 60, 70 k to go mark is it.
Can I just say
really
as
well
well,
chosen.
If any directors are listening to GCN in the car, the breakaway has definitely not done what we just said they did. They're still taking it easy. So if you're calling any team shots, you know, trying to increase the pace, it's not happening.
Because the important competition in July is the breakaway tipping competition, and Adam has gone with Mati Cataneo today.
Well,
Take it easy, boys.
I went with Camden yesterday, so my excitement was doubly so.
I felt really sneaky because yesterday I was asked to do the predictor for Eurosport. No, I said, okay, I'm going to play my cards close to my chest, and I chose Benoit Cosnefroy, thinking about a break. But when it got to this morning in the real competition, our tipping comp, I went with Wout van Aert.
Let's not forget, though, we run Brabant Chapelle up a similar climb, similar terrain towards the finish today.
And he could still go really well and be amongst it.
Definitely
a protagonist.
Proper pace here. These guys have put something in the bank, and if you thought it was getting a bit benign, of course it was, given us a chance to wax lyrical just a little bit, but it's getting serious. And it was always going to be on this plateau. And in fact, before this penultimate climb, they had to get gnarly. Once they get over the top, we've got a long, long descent, which doesn't really unwind until the foot of our final climb around Lausanne. We will, of course, skirt the lake, and it'll look quite familiar to you because we've been visited so often, it seems. Whenever Romandie takes place, of course, it's very much centred in and around the UCI HQ, which is on the banks of the lake. Just looking as Pinot comes by, Fabio Jakobsen there. I was just going to say, he's one of those riders that I'm never used to seeing in his trade kit, because he's always suddenly in a jersey of some sort, and it's the same deal with Peter Sagan. I can't remember ever seeing him really in a trade kit, apart from a sign-on on day one, perhaps on occasion. He's usually in his national jersey. Used to seeing him, of course, in World Champ stripes for such a long time. So whenever I catch sight of Sagan and he's not in something significant in terms of a jersey, I'm always a bit foxed if it's his trade kit. So I'm just thankful that this year he's actually Slovakian champion again. And he is somebody who might actually take a step forward today. He looked very happy yesterday to be centre of attention once again, if only doing a wheelie up to the line at Belfi on horrendous inclines. But it was great to see him with his gander up. So if Sagan's happy, he can be lethal. Another national jersey for you, Florian Sénéchal. We have a smorgasbord of opportunity today, and somebody is going to have a little snack at the end. And the great thing is we don't know who that's going to be. With 66 kilometres to go and a minute and 50 to our break, we've pulled out a margin, an extra margin really, of about 30 seconds. In quite short order, Robbie. They're playing a good game here of Catenacci almost.
They're playing a good game, and like Adam said before, they've chosen the right moment to go full gas, Adam. It's
I was just about to point it out there just before we got this last shot of the break there. Sorry, Robbie, for interrupting you. This man at the back here, Frison, 162 from Lotto Soudal, he is suffering. Cataneo had to come off the front, and Frison shouted to him, get back in front of me. I don't think he's quite on the edge, so with three of them going hard, it is going to be very difficult when just one is sat on the back and giving, almost maybe slowing him down when you get into that rhythm. So it's 2.5 riders in that breakaway pretty much at the minute.
He was beaming back to base there, wasn't he? Wasn't a beam me up Scotty moment, but he's clearly struggling.
Well, that's the thing. Not many riders are capable of getting in the break, riding that tempo, establish the gap, settle into a tempo. Not many are capable of then opening up even more and going even harder again. A guy like Cataneo definitely can. We've just seen it. Fred Wright, he's matching him pedal stroke for pedal stroke. But it looks like Frison, maybe a bit more fatigue set in.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's a bit of a hillier, bigger rider. Maybe not as suited to the terrain, but he's struggling a bit more with that upping of the tempo.
Yeah, he definitely is a time trialist. He's very, very strong, rides the classics, but that's one thing. I was in a team with him back in 2019, my last year, and he was just on the verge of becoming a very good time trialist, but very good at riding at that high threshold, but dropping up and down it and in between. I think that's what he might struggle with today, and I think that's what we're seeing here a little bit, just backing off the pace a bit, just trying to get that little bit of recovery, trying to recover in the wheels. And Pinot at the back of it, right on the back of this peloton now, is strung out, and for one good reason. think it is Godou, sorry, Carlton, you're very, very right. 1:58 the time gap, so you can see how much they've got on the gas.
It's day for him yesterday, actually, as well, Adam. He finished in 6th place. He was fantastic up that climb to Belfi, but was clearly exhausted. You might have seen him just falling on some of the team bags there at the end, trying to put some oxygen back into his lungs. It was a big day for him, Adam, yesterday. I'm not surprised he's at the back just now.
No, I'm not surprised either. Sorry, Rob, you were pointing something out to me then.
Yeah, well, we're looking at this time gap. Look at that. It was down to 1 minute and 1 second just a little bit ago. And as the peloton, as we identified, was stopping for their last nature break, thought this is the good moment, 70k to go. We'll stop, have our last little break. That is when Cataneo really opened the gas, and they've built it from 1 minute out to 2 minutes during that time. But at the same sort of time, not long did it take Bike Exchange to realise what was happening in front. They've upped the tempo in the peloton to try and pull them back and stop it going out too far. Meanwhile, there's still guys chasing back on, including the yellow jersey. So it became a bit of a moment.
Yeah, it definitely did indeed. You can see the rise, little split at the back there, just as you get out that town. It's sort of everyone's got back on from having their wee, and Jumbo Visma here just saying, you know what, we need to get on the pace as well, along with the Bike Exchange rider. I'm still surprised UAE are rolling through with this. I think they'd be quite happy to let it go to the finish, and at this point now, they say, look, it's at 2 minutes now. If we want to catch this back and to help you catch it back for Pogacar, we're going to have to sacrifice one man and quite a lot of energy. So we'll risk to take the stage. We'll not get on the podium a few seconds, and we'll try and save the guys, especially if they've lost one guy as well.
Ineos at Grenadiers there as well. They look fully focused at him. Luke Rowe was very much marshalling the day. He has been.
I mean,
they're so well placed. I feel like that we haven't seen the best of them yet by any means. And I also feel there's a little treasure chest to be opened up with Ineos Grenadiers deeper into this race.
Yeah, we spoke to Steve Cummins this morning, and Steve, we all know what Steve was like as a bike rider. Very clever, picked his moments perfectly, never wasted energy. And he was saying, they're going to leave the responsibility up to other teams, and that's exactly what they're doing today. They're being policed around by Luke Rowe, Luke Rowe's been around for years now. It's almost like he's 45 years old. He feels like he's been around that long. But there's one man, and I think it's pretty much for every team, they would take Luke Rowe on board with him, because he's so good at what he does, positioning his team, making sure his team's in the right place. And that's not just one or two leaders, that's the domestiques, that's making sure they're doing the domestique duties. He is pretty much the ultimate domestique and road captain on the road.
That full focus comes due to the fact that we've talked about riders that we think can win the stage. Van Aert, Michael Matthews, etc. Puncheurs who can climb well and sprint well. But it becomes a GC day, albeit a short one. It's only a short climb in terms of sort of those type of climbers. But certainly they can't afford to get out of position on the run into this final climb, so it becomes a GC day. It's going to get very crowded at the front, but more so than coming into a flat bunch sprint. So it's going to be a very busy one, and the guys like Luke Rowe really have their work cut out to protect their leaders all the way in. And what we're going to start seeing now is fresh riders put to the front of the peloton. I expect another Bike Exchange rider to come up. I thought I spotted Luke Durbridge being sent up towards the front. And, it won't surprise me if even Dylan Groenewegen gets a boat and does some of the work on the front, leading into the final part of the race to peg back what is now a 2 minute gap with just under 62 kilometres to go.
As you pointed out there, Robbie, they've pretty much they haven't got 20 Ks to close the gap, but to take the most amount of time out of them possible on the easiest terrain possible, they've got roughly 20 K. It does go up a slight little bit before it goes down, and that's the end of Frederick Friesson. So we were right in what we thought about him. He's down and out. There's probably not a bad thing for the two in front. They could probably pull a little bit longer turns each on the front, share the workload more evenly without worrying about Friesson behind him.
Well,
but
we're not that far. We're not that far, Adam, from the foot of the penultimate climb here. What are we going to? It peaks at 46. It's not a long climb, 2.3 kilometres. So they're going to have to charge into that one. It'll be about 49 Ks to go. So about 12 kilometres with my rudimentary mathematics. It's very rudimentary. And look at the wind here. That's not the helicopter. This is that. I was just telling you the flag, by the way. Ignore that. It's being shielded by the barn there. The tops of the trees are telling you a story. Let's wait and see if it has any form of impact when they come out and onto the peak. It's going to be these two alone, which makes their task even more difficult. Not that they were being offered an exchange at all. 2 minutes and 5 is the gap they've got, though. keeping something back to deliver later on. Have they got a stiletto tucked down their socks? Let's wait and see. And the wind is clearly picking up. There's enough to go sailing on the Lac de Joux, the Lake of Games. Is that what it means, John?
It is not what it means.
I would like
it would be the
it to
Lac
be.
de Joux if it was the Lake of Games. But the Lac de Joux is what the Lac Les Rousses runs into. The Lac Les Rousses was the one we saw earlier. This is where we see many more sort of things like windsurfing, paddling, water skiing, kite surfing, canoeing, kayaking and pedal boating. And actually there is some evidence of human beings on that particular lake, which is quite nice to see. In winter, lake freezes completely over and they do ice yachting and ice skating on there.
Wow.
Have you ever seen bandy?
I have seen bandy. It's basically
amazing.
ice hockey without barriers on the sides.
Yes,
but more
played with
fighting.
Yeah, much bigger ball.
Yeah.
It's like a concrete ball, half the size of a football, it feels like. And it's the size of 3 football pitches laid side by side by side, and it's only on frozen lakes, and it is brutal. So yeah, whenever they get a frozen lake in these parts, bit of bandy. Sounds like such a benign word, doesn't it? A fancy game of bandy.
That looks like one of those lakes on a beautiful day like this. You want to get a lilo or put loads of armbands on and just go and have a float. Beautiful.
Are you a fervent user of armbands when you
No,
go
but I was
swimming?
just thinking then a lilo with all the choppiness of it, it might like knock you off of it. So armbands would keep you
You can't be
sort
too
of more
careful.
stable. Exactly. So you could just float around in there. Be lovely.
For any Australians listening in, armbands, it means floaties, the things you stick on your arms when you go swimming. We don't call them armbands, call them floaties.
Floaters
I don't know
are
how, I
something
don't know quite
else
where we get that.
entirely, I'm afraid.
Oh, Carlton. Oh, you mean sediment in the beer when you get
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
I apologise on behalf.
Anyway, back to Cataneo and Fred Wright off the front of the peloton. 2 minutes and 10 seconds, 59k to go. The gap is still going the wrong way when it comes to the likes of Matthews, Wout van Aert, whose teams are working hard on the front of the peloton. But at least it is a battle against 2 men. And for Bike Exchange and Jumbo, up their sleeve, they still have fresh riders in the peloton who can be sent to the front. And poor old Fred Frison. It's been a long day out and without reward.
He's got that old Schumacher neck, hasn't he? Days of old that we used to look at. So Sean's cracking up here. He knows exactly what I mean. Schumacher, one of the black hats, I'm afraid. He used to wear his sun specs on the back of his helmet, and it looked like a very grumpy frog. Yes. 58.7 kilometres from home, and we've got a minute and 7 back to Frisson, who's out there, but also 2 minutes and 10 significantly back to these guys. And who is engaged in the chase? It's Bike Exchange. They are, of course, thinking about Michael Matthews today. Can't wait. It could be that all hell breaks loose. Let's see. Absolutely beautiful. Virtually cloudless today. The prospect of rain throughout this race has been hanging around, but we only got it in Copenhagen on the time trial. Ever since then, it's been absolutely glorious. Temperature, however, could become a major factor within the race the deeper we get into it, not least because many people are saying what could work against Tadej Pogačar. Well, heat is the answer, and when we get into the high Alps, it may well be a factor, despite the fact we're going to altitude. And if it does get hot, Adam, some don't sustain it very well, and Pogačar's one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. That's from what history's told us so far. I mean, with that Ventoux day, that was a super hot day, and we saw him get dropped up there by Vingegaard. And if the heat is going to keep increasing, which we think it is, Carlton, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him. But he's probably aware of that. He's probably been training in the heat a little bit more. He lives in the south of France, so he's probably been trying to do what he can to adapt his body to those heat conditions so we can cope with them a little better.
Well, let's just hope that that is the case on his behalf. It's you don't want the race to be ill-affected by any such bad fortune. they're not hanging around. 56 kilometres per hour. We're on a flat plateau. We've got a headwind at the moment, albeit a light one, I might add. Around about 10 kilometres per hour, something like that. But anything that's knocking your vim and vigour in an attempt to wind in a breakaway is going to have some kind of impact. And it's been a long day. In fact, it must feel like it's been a long race. I know we had, after only 3 days of racing, a rest day, but there was a big transfer to be dealt with. And riders, sometimes they get interrupted in terms of their rhythm within a race. And we picked it back up into Calais. Then it was the Arenberg and the cobbles. Some floated over them, some crashed upon them. Then Longwy, another dramatic day that Tadej Pogačar came through to beat Michael Matthews. Close friends they may have been, but best of enemies in that circumstance. And then Pogačar yesterday into de Belfi. Superplage, amazing. Then Lausanne, of course, our destination today. And they are motoring.
They are motoring. Sorry, Carlton, I was just pointing one thing out. There is now, as Robbie pointed out, 2 bike exchange riders. And not only that, the UAE rider has stopped working through now. So just 2 teams, UAE, Jumbo-Visma. Jumbo-Visma, only 1 rider still, Nathan van Hooijdonk. But UAE have gone, look, we're all right. We might give it a nudge on the climb. But sorry, Robbie.
Armand Grundal Janssen is the man from Bike Exchange to join Chris Juul Jensen at the front in the chase.
2 minutes 4, though.
2 minutes 11
to
the peloton. So 2:10. So that gap is really pretty stable. So Cataneo and Fred Wright, they are putting up quite the incredible fight.
Well, we're going to find out about the Col de Petra Felix. It's only category 4, but it might be a launch pad. It's Bernie.
We had to race here to get here 18 kilometers from the finish line in Switzerland. You can see the flags. It's a tail crosswind section here. But before they get over this Cat 4, fast downhill. The climb itself, it's pretty steady riding, but big roads after, super fast. And this is where it starts. No chance pretty much for the breakaway there because it's such a fast run-in all the way down here. Bit up and down, some road furniture through some villages. But the wind could play a little role. But as soon as it crashed over here, in 4 kilometers, they come down to the Lac Le Mans, and there the road furniture just gets crazy. Roundabouts, road furniture, but massive ones, really big ones. And this is when the leaders and the guys who want to win today have to be at the front.
Just beyond Burnley there, it's nice to see the Welsh flag displayed. Lots of fans travel to see Geraint Thomas. And the way he is riding, he kind of feels like a bit of a none too secret weapon, doesn't he? It'll be wonderful to see how he works out in this race, the deeper we get into it. 2 minutes and 8, 54.4 kilometres. We are heading for this climb. Will it be a launch pad? That's the big question, Adam.
I don't think it'll be a launch pad, not with that descent after it. I think the peloton will ride a strong pace up there. We might see a UAE rider come to the front again. We know they're 1 man down now, so they're down to 7 riders in that team, so they can't just be pulling on the front every day. And this is almost a great situation for them. We've seen them riding on the front, maybe to try and go with Pogačar at the end of today's stage, maybe not, but they're leaving it to Bike Exchange and Jumbo-Visma at the minute to say, look, if you guys want to win, then you're going to have to do the bulk of the work. We might give you a hand on the climb, but apart from that, we're not too fussed if he wins or loses. If the opportunity comes, we can probably have a little go and help in the final. But I even think this climb, I had a closer look at it, and it is 2 kilometres in length, Carlton, as you said, not too steep, but the top of the climb is a little bit further on. It averages to the very, very top of the summit, not where the climb officially ends in the road book. It's 4.1 kilometres at 4% average.
I never know why they do that, to be honest. Just keep on climbing beyond the climb. But it could be enthralling. I was wondering if this group might fracture. We've got some great descenders who've, amongst teams that haven't got much out of it. We've also seen some very, very big names struggling yesterday, Robbie. One of those was Lutsenko as well, I might add. I'm not quite sure what's up with him. 7th last year, but Astana, at the beginning of the day, they were mustered at the front, wanting to be in the break. Could they get something out of today? And there's plenty of others as well you might consider.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that anybody from Astana has the legs to get the job done today, but doesn't mean they'll stop trying to get themselves in breaks and see if they can get a stage win.
Good descender, someone like Jon Izagirre. I think it's probably need a bit more of a focused descent, like a high alpine descent that's highly technical, if he was going to come through and do something for the likes of Cofidis. I'm just looking through to to try and conjure, really, in my own mind, where the win might come today. And that's what's been fascinating about this race so far. We've never been certain, even in the last, 100 metres of yesterday's stage, we still didn't know who was going to get it. Would it be Vingegaard? Would it be Pogacar? Would it be Lenny Kamner? In the end, it was the man in yellow that did the job. Lakeside looks absolutely glorious, 52.3 kilometres from home. And a gap of 2 minutes and 9. They've done a fantastic job, Robbie, of actually making everyone chase them. Only a trio from the start of the day.
Yeah, they are doing a fantastic job all day. It's been pretty much under control, and the peloton got it down to a minute, but it was really clever, I think, communication by the sports director from Quickstep Alpha Vinyl to sort of communicate with Cataneo and get him to pass it on to the other two. Like, this is the moment to turn the throttle and let it go. But it was perfect timing as the peloton was having that last nature break, and you know that there's going to be a lull. That's the time to go as hard as you can. And okay, they didn't get a free minute. They rode really hard to get it, but they got a minute with a combination of hard riding and good timing. So now they're defending that, and in fact it went out to 2 minutes. It's still at 2:11. The gap is not coming down, and when they get over this Cat 4 climb, it's quite a long descent for some 15 kilometres. I mean, the main part of the descent is about 10-12k long. They will lose hardly any time down that, as we see a pretty intricate piece of field art off to the side. And knowing this is a watchmaking region here in the Jura in Switzerland, they do make fantastic watches. Loving my new Breitling, by the way.
Interesting, by the way. I hope you're not sponsored. Interestingly...
No, I bought it.
Interestingly, 10-2, or indeed, 10 past 10, is where they always set watches when they're putting them on advertising. I don't know why. But there you go. Apparently it's the open arms, happy attitude of the hands. John, are we in watchmaking territory? Have we got some little mesters here who are cobbling together your latest pocket watch for your collection?
I haven't worn a watch for many, many years, actually. So any sponsors that would like to give me a watch, do feel free.
Well, Robbie's bidding for
nice.
one.
Nice, John.
I've got one.
Subtle. I bought one. Just confirming, I bought mine. I just love it. I just love it.
Okay,
that's
good.
all.
Good man. Anyway, 10-2 is how the hands are displayed in watch adverts. Moving on.
Great. God. Christian Jensen doing a fantastic job on the front here. Still 2 minutes and 10. Jumbo-Visma sat second wheel. Van Hooijdonk and another bike exchange riding behind him. Back to you, Carlton.
Yeah, Sean's getting very happy here, sitting with his contentedly wearing his Festina watch.
Sean's getting very happy because we've not been for a run yet.
Come on.
Yes, well, I'm just looking at my watch here, my Festina, and looking at this time gap. It's another great bloke. Excuse. Sorry. But, yeah, it's going to be an interesting final, as we can see here. You know, the gap is quite a big one, and, you know, the downhill, we have that about 12 or 15 kilometres approx downhill, and then we get into the flatter terrain, but it's not totally flat either. It does kick up. So from nothing really in the earlier part of the day, which looked like a breakaway, was going to have no chance at all. Again, you know, there's hope there at the moment with still 50 kilometres to go.
Well, they're nearly at the KOM point, but not at the crest. We'll be hearing more from Sean in 4 or 5 kilometres' time. He's just going to go out and put another watch on and mention that as well. Wide open plains here, absolutely beautiful. John, it's a wonderful part of the world, this.
It is absolutely beautiful, and it's a part of the world. I spent a little bit of time in Montreux, a little bit further up Lake Geneva, and it's always absolutely stunning. I actually, Adam, that's a lovely place to go running, and I think even you wouldn't be dropped by Sean running around Lake Geneva.
What do you mean, even me?
Well, I get the feeling from the sentiment that's poured out of Sean and the way that he reacted on our WhatsApp groups, the suggestion yesterday that you flicked him when out for a run, that perhaps it was a little misplaced, your bravado there.
No, it wasn't. It was a fact. It was a fact.
He's upset about it.
Sean's going to have to be upset this time. I'm sorry, Sean. Anyway.
He's dipped out to get himself a coffee, which is probably quite useful. Just noticing tongue out there from Ralf Majka. He looked spent at the end yesterday. He waves them, waved Pogacar through when Pogacar was asking for that last little bit from him, Adam. He used his resources to the maximum, Pogacar, yesterday, but of course timed it perfectly as well.
He did. I mean, he timed it perfectly. I think Pogacar from then on rode into that final 300 metres at a solid tempo. I'm sure you've already talked about this, but just to sort of neutralise attacks coming a little bit earlier than he wanted him to, but it just shows the strength and class of Pogacar. The man in the yellow jersey there, just tucked in behind his teammates. This is going to be an exciting one today, but time is ticking for these riders in this group to bring them back, still hovering at around 2 minutes and 8 seconds.
Just look at this. Setting a tempo at the moment, that's what they've got to do, but it's being matched by a duo up front. And if you have a limited number of riders who are prepared to take on the chase behind, let's say 2 or 3 exchange, it's still only 2 versus 3, despite the fact that the peloton are in their wake. Could it be a wake-up call for everybody if Wout van Aert comes through at the end today? There's your KOM, and as Adam was saying, they continue to climb beyond it rather cruelly. But, Robbie, it's going to be a long, long descent once they do get over the crest here, and that will be welcome for these guys, I'm certain.
Definitely welcome for the 2 off the front. They know it's an opportunity to consolidate the gap that they've got now. Still over 2 minutes, so they've only lost 5 or 6 at the moment. Get this long downhill where they will not lose much at all, if any. So it gives a bit of recovery time. If there'll be a pedalling descent, they'll be working as hard as they can. Gravity will do its thing, so that will defend a lot of the gap, and those kilometres slide by so quickly. You know, when you're going 60, 70 and nearly 80 kilometres an hour, so it's a good thing. Let's look at the back of the peloton. Mika Murku struggling, Kasper Asgreen as well. Expect to see a few of the sprinters start to get in trouble if they're already not out the back. I did say earlier, quite possibly for Bike Exchange, who have been washed away from the front at the moment with the pace being set here by Nathan van Hooijdonk. I would expect to see, once we get over the climb, if Dylan Groenewegen is still in the peloton, him try to get to the front to do something for the team as well, because it is going to be all hands on deck.
Pinot, I think.
Yes, it is.
Oh, honestly. If that man, if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. This is unbelievable. Every single day, and we talk about those who just sometimes don't bounce back. I hope he does, but a lot of expectations heaped upon his shoulders yesterday, and he's tasted the asphalt yet again this time by. It looks okay, thank goodness, but let's just hope he doesn't suffer from dropped shoulders, as they say. 2 minutes and 6 to our duo up front, and as Robin McEwen was saying, it is time to kick on, if they possibly can, on the descent. They'll be able to pick all of their lines. A much crowded line behind them. The peloton will string out, and that 27 kilometres per hour may well switch around to, say, 72. Let's wait and see by the time they get over the top and start to drive down into the valley. And Lakeside Lausanne, oh, no.
Don't tell me he's fallen again, or he's maybe injured himself in the first one.
I think he got injured in the first one. He's in tears at the side of the road. Let's have a look.
No, it's another crash feedback.
Oh.
Surely not.
From Trexiger, and that is not Pinot's fault.
No.
I mean, maybe needed to try and swerve away earlier.
I thought he was in tears, but he's actually his sunglasses actually smashed in his face.
Yeah, and he's actually caught about 5 kilo of feedback straight in the face. Back up and going again. He will get going. And luckily, most of the stuff in the feed bag is soft, but he's actually being pushed off by one of the people from. Is it from his own team or Trek?
Yeah, that's Trek Segafredo.
It is Trek, because I mean they will be apologising profusely, because that is a no-no. You don't reach across a rider, no matter how much of an emergency you think it is to get the bag to a rider. You don't reach across like that.
I was wondering if we were going to see it again then, but we're not. As they cross the line here, nightmare. Gosh, well, just as I was saying about his ill fortune, it looks like I've managed to take over the Robbie curse here. I was saying if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have none at all, and it just got from bad to worse.
It did go,
almost as soon as we saw it. For goodness sake, dreadful.
Well, it might be going from good to bad now for the breakaway, because Luke Durbridge has now appeared at the front of the peloton for Bike Exchange. And Matthew White, the team director, did say, and this is not giving a secret away at all, he did say, we are going to throw the kitchen sink at it, and they are going to use every single rider in the team to try and bring this back together to give Michael Matthews a chance at a stage win, because they don't have a specialist climber nor a GC rider. With all due respect to Nick Schultz, he'll be trying to get in breaks on lumpy days, but they don't have someone who can win high mountain stages. So they've got to do this, and they said they're going to commit 100%, and they're going to have to. 46k to go, still with 2 minutes.
72. I said it. Oh, time for me to take a step back. This is going to be a fantastic finish, and to carry you there, Rob Hatch.
Thank you very much, Carlton. It is going to be a fantastic finish, and they are bombing it down here. 70 kilometres per hour. Brilliant, brilliant stuff from Fred Wright, who's yet to win a professional bike race, and Mattia Cattaneo, who has 3, but of course nothing at this big level. We're 45 kilometres from the finish in the Olympic city of Lausanne by the lake in Switzerland. And this is a very, very big moment. The green jersey back in the main bunch at 2 minutes. Of course, Thibaut Pinot having that awful, awful bit of luck. I'm glad I had my microphone on mute then, because I think I was one of many people looking at the television there and screaming at it. In the meantime, this is sort of like MotoGP.
Yeah, this is brilliant. The only problem is I've got to dip out in a minute, but the main problem with this is now you can see there's 2 of them. Fred Wright's been on the front for about a minute now, then they'll swap off. But look at Cattaneo just sat behind freewheeling. He's getting that recovery that he needs. Whereas in the peloton, they'll have 4 more, 5 more fresh guys that can just keep rotating and keep that speed higher. So this descent, sadly, is not lending itself to these guys in front, but I wish them all the best. I can't pick out which one of them I want to win. Cattaneo is my pick for today, but Fred Wright never won a race and done an amazing classics campaign this year, so I'll leave you to it.
Thank you, Adam. You better catch Adam, Dan, as well as Robbie Adola on today's breakaway after the live actions finish. And if you miss it live, and it's the weekend, there's plenty to do. You've got to be somewhere. You can watch it on demand, and that is on GCN Plus and Discovery Plus. Discovery Plus, where you can come for the race, stay for the ride. There is something for everyone.
Just be careful you don't walk into something or someone while you're watching it heads down on your device.
It's easy to get distracted, isn't it?
It is gripping racing. I mean, look at yesterday's stage, how it panned out. And today is going to be, I think, something similar, still holding around 2 minutes. And as I said before, this descent gives an opportunity to freewheel a little bit, get into an aero tuck, staying within the UCI regulations of not going in what they had been calling the super tuck, which means for those at home maybe not familiar, you must keep your hands on the handlebars and your bum on the seat. So we used to see riders get their hands in the centre of the handlebars. You can still do that as long as your backside's in contact with the saddle. What has been banned is the sitting on the top tube of the bike. So coming forward off the saddle, getting really low, sitting on that top tube and holding the handlebars in the middle. Incredibly aerodynamic, but near no control. I mean, the pros, they can pull it off. I think it's more something that is intended to go through the rest of the sport, down through the junior levels and amateur ranks, to stop people having nasty accidents, because professionals, this is why they are pros. They are the best at it, but it's not something for everyone. You're not in full control. So that is where that rule has come from. As long as it's the same for everyone, then it still works.
It really is a don't try this at home thing, isn't it?
It's so tempting. It's so tempting to do. When the rule first came in...
Well, when you're as good as you are, it is, I guess.
Well, you saw so many riders sort of inadvertently sort of starting to get near it and then go, oh, no, hang on a second, I'm not allowed to do that. Someone got thrown out of a race when they first changed the rule. They did the super tuck. They said, you're out, and disqualified from the race. They set a precedent really quickly. This is Thibaut Pinot, who's had, as Carlton said, his luck going from bad to worse. Came off on the climb. As he's making his way back, they hit in the face with a feed bag from another team. So he's having a rotten day. 90 kilometres an hour.
It's a drama, isn't it, being a Thibaut Pinot fan? I know there were a lot of people who have placed expectations and hopes on yesterday, and we didn't see too much of him. Of course, it was all about Tadej Pogačar, who today is looking for a hat-trick, maybe. They've got to bring this break back first, but The finish, which we're going to have a look at in a minute with Alberto Contador, is very, very hard. Sort of moves up in steps. You've got a really hard first couple of kilometres, then an easy kilometre, and then there's a wall to the finish, and it could be an epic ending to stage 8 of this Tour de France. Just over 40 kilometres from the conclusion now of stage 8 of the Tour de France. It's our second weekend of the race. We're heading into Switzerland. First stage finish here for a few years now. First stage finish in Lausanne for 22 long years.
Yeah, I was there.
And we've got a break of 2.
Eric Decker won the stage back then. Late escape, he was with Mario Aert. We caught Mario Aert in the sprint, but Decker stayed away.
Oh, these two got to stay away. Thibaut Pinot still chasing on behind.
I'm going to go with a no, they're not going to stay away. 1:44, it's starting to come down now, so that the chase is intensified behind, but also with that 5-kilometre climb to the finish and what I expect to be, really such a fast pace on the lead into that final climb. No, I don't think they will stay away, but wow, they're putting up a good fight. Would expect nothing less in the Tour de France with what's at stake. Stage wins up for grabs. And what's still to come, there aren't that many more chances for the breakaway artists.
And tomorrow we're going to the mountains. You imagine that the GC riders will be looking at that one again. We welcome Sean Kelly back, 40 Ks to go. Sean, it is an intriguing setup for this finale.
Yes, it is. It's turning out to be an exceptional final, an exciting final, sorry. From the earlier part of the day, we were expecting this big breakaway, and if that was the case, the race might be closed down behind. Nobody of any great danger in the GC standing. It could be a pretty boring final. It has been quiet for quite a lot of the day, but we're going to get a really exciting final now. Will they, won't they? With this advantage coming down to just 1:44 at the moment. The two out front again. It's going to be a question if the two, Cataneo and Wright, if they have the power to keep on working really well. It's a possible one, but it looks like Peloton, they have the manpower and the fresher men.
And they're putting those men to work. Jumbo-Visma have been working. Bike Exchange throwing everything at this for Michael Matthews, who, we'll remind you, has 3 Tour stage wins, but nothing for 5 long years. Here's another man who's got a few Tour wins and stage wins. Alberto Contador, looking at today's grand finale in Lausanne.
Well, we're here in Lausanne for the last climb of the day. 4.8 kilometres. The first section, pretty tough.
Primera rampa, dura.
It's important to enter these left-hand turns in a good position, because otherwise you may pay for your effort from that first straight section. 3 kilometres, now we reach the rest of the climb. Here we start to find the hardest part. And this is really tough. It's important to pace yourself well here, because otherwise there is no doubt you're going to really, really pay the price. We're at the finish line. The last kilometre feels really long. First part is tough, flattens out before becoming demanding again. The wind, that could also play an important role. Honestly, I think there could be some differences made here for the GC contenders as well.
Alberto's loyal legion of fans still following him around everywhere. Good to see. Of course, he found it difficult there. Sean, the rider's going to find it difficult too. A real three-step to the finish there. Really hard start, easier in the middle, and then that horrible ramp at the end.
Yes, well, you can see there it doesn't look difficult, although Alberto was suffering a bit. We could hear him, the heavy breathing there, but that's to be expected. You know, he's not in competition anymore. When you go on a climb like that and you make the effort, of course, but in the race it will be, you know, full-on racing here, and especially now, you know, with the fight for the stage win, if it comes back to that, well then it could be a real aggressive push all the way to the finish. And yeah, the GC men will have to be careful. They will have to keep their positions well, but I don't think there'll be any great difference unless there's somebody really suffering from yesterday, haven't recovered well. You know, they might start losing a little bit of ground, but in general I think all the GC men should be able to stay together. And yeah, the question is, will the sprinters, how many of them will be able to stay there, and who will be the one who will survive, or will there be a number of them survive?
Well, we had a good look at it there from Alberto Contador. I gather, Robbie, you've got the vital statistics of the climb.
Yes, I've got a few more stats for you. So the distance, 4.4 kilometres, average gradient, just 4.9%. You say, OK, that's not too bad, about 5%. That's right, but maximum grade, like you said, it goes up in steps, and that middle part, it flattens off and actually dips down a little bit before the final kick up to the finish, which is about 1.4k long. And in that section, that final step up, it has its maximum gradient of 15%. So it is a really big kick before you come into that last kilometre. So it drags and drags and drags. It eases off right at the very top as they come past the stadium, but the damage is already done to the legs. So it's going to be a really tough one for the fast men to hang in on. And do not be surprised if we see a repeat of Longwy with Tadej Pogacar kicking away from the rest. And there's bonus seconds on the line as well. So he's trying to, you know, build out his advantage even more if he can. So he will not be just rolling in defensively. It's just not the way he rolls.
But it's also, Sean, something that you can't afford to do if you're a general classification contender. Of course, it's not easy to just watch people on those gradients. People will be giving their all, and you've got to do the same and follow.
Yes, well, you have to do, and that's what the GC contenders have to do. You know, pretty much 80% of the stages you have, you know, to be really up there in the final. Okay, a flat run in, not as risky, but this one, always the danger of, you know, the splits coming, and so you have to, you know, fight to be in the position. You have to push as well, and you know, in those finals, some of the real climbers might not like this sort of stuff, because you know, a longer climb where you get into a rhythm, that's where they're more comfortable. So these short, steep ramps, you know, the so explosive, huge explosive stuff, some of them do not like it, and they will have to dig deep within the GC contenders as well. And it's going to be an interesting one on that steep section, as Robbie is talking about. How hard, how fast they will go on that one. That will be the question. I think we will see if the sprinters can survive. And if you get over that, you know, a little bit of time to recover. And as a sprinter, if you get over it and a little bit easier in the wheels, not going too fast maybe on the easier section, meaning in that final 800 metres, final kilometre, you could recover a bit and have enough to, you know, produce that explosive sprint. But yeah, the steep section will be vital, how they ride it.
They're travelling at over 60 kilometres per hour here, with the wind blowing from the left-hand side, as you can see. And we're on the plateau just above Lake Geneva, Lac Le Mans, in the local parlance. Of course, in the English-speaking world, we know it as Lake Geneva. And we're going to go back in time now to the last time we had a stage finish in Lausanne. Robbie just mentioned it was 22 years ago, Jonathan.
That is right. Robbie remembers this, and it was July the 19th back in 2000. Stage 7 finishing in Lausanne. Eric Decker taking the win ahead of the man in green on that occasion, which was Eric Zabel. Fred Rodriguez came home in third place on that occasion, with Robbie finishing in fifth. Another Eurosport expert, Jackie Dordan, Jens Vogt and David Moncoutier, all in the peloton that day as well.
I was hoping you wouldn't recognise me there, John.
I did. I'm sorry, I recognised you, but actually, what you won't remember is I met you at the reception for that Tour de France in the Australian embassy overlooking the Eiffel Tower right at the beginning of the tour. You won't remember that. I mean, you don't have to pretend. Quite genuinely.
I remember,
but you remember the occasion.
I don't remember specifically remembering you. I'm sorry, but I do remember being at that function.
Yeah.
Unless you were the guy who did that. No, I won't bring that up. But there was a guy who did this thing who I remember, and if that was you, I remember you, but I'm not going to mention it.
It wasn't me.
That's what they all say.
Just over 30 kilometres
remain.
remain.
I'll say it. He had the last profiterole.
Oh, I thought it was handing out chocolates with the ambassador or something like that. Little bits of splits here in this win. We just saw it really blowing off to the side there.
It's quick. I mean, look at the intensity at the front. Luke Durbridge, he has been pinning it since he got to the front because it's still 128, 31 kilometres to go. So they realise the urgency. And as long as Luke Durbridge can hold this tempo, don't forget he was in the break yesterday on the way to La Planche de Belfi. So he's having a couple of big days out, but they've still got men poised behind them. They've still got Jack Bauer. They've used Armand Grundal-Janssen. I thought I might have just spotted Michael Matthews sitting behind Bauer up there already. I'm just wondering if Dylan Groenewegen has been able to survive that cat fight. I think he is up there, and if they may also use him. They've got a couple of other riders still up their sleeve as well.
Looking out for the green jersey there as well. Let's not forget about Wout van Aert. All the talk of Pogacar, the GC guys, and of course Michael Matthews there.
Yeah, and Jumbo-Visma really trying to do it economically using just one rider. They've been using Nathan van Hooijdonk all day. They want to spare everybody else they possibly can, but if it comes down to an emergency situation, then they're going to use someone else. But really trying to do it with as little energy expended as possible. But it works out for them anyway. Positioning Wout and getting him right for the finish is exactly the same thing they need to be doing for Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglic anyway. So, yeah, they would be riding at the front anyhow on the run into the foot of the climb.
Some late feeding being done for Ineos Grenadiers here. Getting ready for the final efforts. Tom Pidcock, let's remember him as well. We talked about him quite early on in the broadcast. And there is Lac Le Mans. There's Lake Geneva. It's a pretty sight, isn't it? Sean, you must have great memories of racing in Switzerland. You were rather successful here.
Maybe Sean was just off air for a moment. I've got to say, I was just going to mention, that is one of the most beautiful rides you can do. Sure, you can go and ride up in the mountains, which is also wonderful. It hurts a bit more. But the lap of Lake Le Mans, it's around 160, 180 kilometres. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It was a while since I've done it. But absolutely beautiful ride along the lake. It's one I would do over and over and over.
Our good colleague Magnus Begstedt is a huge fan of that ride as well. We had countless conversations about that. You can see where we're heading tomorrow, actually, over the other side of the lake. That is French territory. But we're in Switzerland here. Not too far from Montreux and the little Riviera down there. It's beautiful in summer. In fact, this is Tour de Romandie country right here, right now. But of course, we're used to seeing it at a very different time of year. It's often grey and rainy, misty. Beautiful summer weather.
I've ridden a lot of Tour de Romandie stages in the rain in this region, but it is a wonderful place to ride. The roads are silky smooth. Great place to race your bike. You always feel like you're a few kilometres an hour faster, and you are.
That's a huge difference. I mean, I think I was looking at the Tour de Suisse the other week, and there's that moment when you pass from Italian roads over to Ticinese roads, the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. You certainly pick up a couple of extra Ks per hour, don't you? Just going across the border.
Definitely.
It's a Cossonay. Jonathan, what are we giving that?
I feel with the Pasteur getting a 10, it's quite hard that being a benchmark. So I'm going to go for a 7.
I'm going to go with a 5. I mean, OK, there was a fair bit of work put into it in terms of how many pieces they had to arrange, but due to its simplicity, I'm going to go as low as a 5.
I mean, that is hard. Very hard indeed.
Yeah, maybe I'm just having one of those days.
Is it because you're remembering someone taking the last profiterole back in 2000?
Probably. However, if it was made of profiteroles, it'd get a higher score.
Through Cossonay we come, heading down towards the lake. Gap down to 1 minute 20 now. How's this developing, Sean, as we see? Well, I'll just break off briefly. I think there's been a little bit of a split behind. It still looks like Jumbo-Visma riding hard.
Looks like someone missed the corner.
I'm sure we'll get a replay of that in a moment.
Wrong side of that traffic island, I think. I think just didn't quite make it and just held it on the road. It looked like maybe Durbridge just miscalculated.
Here we go. We'll sort each other out again. Get back into working together. Interesting that Intermarché is starting to move up. We did have Alexander Kristoff thinking about trying to get in the break early on. There's also, looking at this finish, looking more at people like Andrea Pasqualon, perhaps, for them, rather than Kristoff, really. But again, 1 minute 21, 26 kilometres still remaining. Sean, how's it developing, this, in the last few kilometres?
Well, it's as we expected. It's going to be full-on racing now, and you know, the guys out front still, you know, really committed. And back in the peloton here, yeah, that the tactic is being played. Bike Exchange, of course, are using just the minimum riders possible. They want to keep riders in reserve for the run-in to get their man Matthews in a good position, which is very important. Also, the other teams like Jumbo-Visma, they're going to try and do that same, because we know in these hectic run-ins, when you have teammates around you to position you for as long as possible, and especially, you know, into that final ramp, if you have riders who can, you know, drop you into a really good position, or even take you up that final ramp and get you onto the sprint better again. So, you know, they're playing that game, and that is a very dangerous game at times, because some of the teams, they stay off for too long, and then the two riders out in front just keep on going at the same rate. They will be expecting them to tire, because they've been out there, you know, for a long time today, and the days we have had in this race, fatigue is going to be the thing. And when you're out the breakaway all day, normally it starts hitting you in that final 20 kilometres. So that's what's being, you know, calculated by the teams here, and sometimes they do get it wrong.
Well, Rob and Sean, we've spoken at length today because of the amount of work done by their teams. Wout van Aert, the obvious choice. He can do everything, but can he do it today on a climb that's a pretty tough one? Michael Matthews trying to hang in there. Let's not forget he's been fourth in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Tadej Pogacar, of course, he can do everything. He's already won in Longwy as well as yesterday. But others who could come and shake the tree, others who could get amongst it and possibly take the stage win. Benoit Cosnefroy, he's pretty rapid at the top of a tough sort of climb, the man from AG2R. Bora Hansgrohe, I think they used their best chances yesterday. I think they'll be happy to just keep Vlasov in position and not too far out of it. From Quick Step, I'm not seeing anybody that can just sort of take over the mantle from Cataneo out of the break. I would have thought Baggioli, but he was getting dropped just
Baggioli would be
before.
the man, wouldn't he?
He was getting dropped on the Cat 4, and it wasn't just going back to the car. But outside of that, then if I go through Victor Lafay, he's a guy from Cofidis who I'm not exactly sure of his form, but this is normally something that could suit him well. Valentin Madouas, David Godou, he's pretty rapid. We saw that. He beat Wout van Aert in the Dauphiné. Romain Bardet, he'd have to go on the attack and then not get a reaction from some of the faster GC men. Alberto Bettiol, most certainly, on a climb like this with a fast finish as well. Magnus Cort, if he hadn't expended so much energy within the first week, I would have given a chance to as well, but not so much now. Caleb Ewan, I think it's going to be too hard for him as well. But Warren Barguil, there's an outsider for you.
Keep your eye on the former French champion. It's still Cattaneo and Wright, and they have just over a minute of a gap. The Italian and the Brit.
You know, just going back maybe 6 or 7 years ago, you would have almost already given the victory bouquet and the medal to Peter Sagan on this one. I'm thinking today it's just outside his, well outside his comfort zone. It's going to be not comfortable for anyone, but I think it's just beyond him today at the current form of Peter Sagan. Not to say he won't try, but he hasn't shown lately on a finish like this one of being the Peter Sagan of old, which I think is normal.
Peter Sagan did return to form with that wonderful win at the Tour de Suisse, but again, it was a very different finish. It was outside the National Velodrome in Grenken. We haven't been too far from there, actually, today. It was flattish after hanging on all day long and beating in a real full gas sprint some of the top fast men. Sean, I'm interested to see how you gauge Peter Sagan's current ability, actually, because, of course, again, similarities the way you raced and the way he raced at his very best as well. Do you agree with Robbie that something like this, in this company with the Pogs of this world, the Rogs of this world, the Van Aerts and all those, do you think that he can keep company?
No, I don't think we've seen already in some of the finishes, notably to the one in 2 days ago, Longwy. You know, a very difficult run-in as well, maybe more difficult than this one, but I don't think Peter Sagan has, you know, the explosive power with the riders he's going to be with, and, you know, with a peloton of riders, whatever the left going into that very final sprint in the final kilometre, the final 1,500 metres, I don't think he will be able to match that pace. And yeah, it would definitely, as Robbie said, a number of years ago in the grand years of Sagan, he would be loving this one, and you'd be asking who can beat him here. So yeah, it's a one I think is going to be too difficult for him today. Mats Pedersen, he's another one. You know, he can produce these performances, although the steep gradient might be a little bit too heavy for him. But again, you know, he's a classic rider. He can produce that explosive power, and maybe he might be able to fling in there. But I think, yeah, a bit too on the heavy side as well for this very difficult run. And when it comes down to a bunch sprint, or what's left to be a bunch sprint, you know, it's not the question of being in a breakaway where you're the strongest man. It's going to be a lot of guys up here in the GC standings who are going to be fighting as well.
Mathieu van der Poel fans, are they to be given any encouragement by the fact that he was attacking early on today? And for the first time in a few days, I've just seen him riding in about 20th to 30th position at this late stage in the race.
It'll be a nice surprise because he's looked and felt and commented on how flat he has been in this Tour de France. He wrote a very good opening prologue. Not his best one ever, but it was a good, solid effort. You thought, OK, he looks pretty good coming into this Tour off an extremely difficult Giro, which, let's be honest, he made it difficult for himself by attacking just so much. And even in mountain stages where there was a slim chance, he just buckled himself. But since that first day in this Tour, he has not looked like the Mathieu van der Poel that we've become accustomed to. It would be a nice surprise. You know, you can't write him off at all. I mean, he hasn't been himself, hasn't looked that good. He's looked forlorn, but that's when he pops up. So, yes, he's a chance. Why not?
Inside the final 20 kilometres now, we're getting closer to that lovely lake view. That is Le Lac Le Mans, Lake Geneva. France on the other side. This is the Swiss side. Tomorrow, it's into those mountains right across the lake where we will head. Châtel Porte des Soleils is where we'll be heading.
"20 kilometres to go, 1 minute and 2 seconds. They are on track to pull them back. In fact, I think they'll have them within the first few hundred metres of the climb, if not before. But they're timing it, I think, to perfection.
Well, Porte du Soleil tomorrow, Lausanne today. That's not the greatest thing to breathe in, is it, when you're riding alongside?
They're lucky the breeze is going the other way. But there used to be this, well, an old... It was a given, and I'm looking at the corn on the other side. It must be an early start to the growing season, the harvest. It used to be in the Tour de France that when they were harvesting the wheat and the corn was head high, you knew you're almost in Paris. Bit soon for that call, but it's probably an early season. It used to hold true every year, because once I got told it, Neil Stevens told me that back in 1997, and every year I'd be down in the south having a look at, oh gee, the corn's a bit short. if it's not head high on me, it's not growing very well at all. But indeed, by the time you were riding into Paris, they were harvesting the wheat. And
well, we've got an expert with us in the commentary box, in Mr. Kelly, on that.
Yes, well, it's called winter wheat, Robbie.
Winter wheat.
Yes, that's earlier. So, and the spring wheat then is later in the year. So that's
good news.
That's where you're getting confused.
So they're still on schedule.
Yes.
Does it taste any different?
No. Same taste, I believe.
No tasting notes on the wheat there.
We'll go to John for that one.
Oh, he's gluten intolerant, isn't he? No.
No, that's Carlton. I'm gluten something else. But
oh no, that's right. You took the last. You took the last profiterole.
Anyway, Luke Durbridge. He's on great form at the minute. I heard a few whispers that his time trial form was really getting back to where it was a few years back, Robbie.
Yeah, he's been really strong on the way into this Tour de France, and they're expecting big things. You know, got in the break yesterday. Okay, it didn't work out, but one of his fellow breakaway companions nearly made it in Leonard Kemner. But Durbridge riding really, really strong, and you know he's at the moment able to spare the rest of the team as it stands now, chasing these two. Mattia Cattaneo, the man on the front in that slow-mo. Now it's Fred Wright, number 88 from Bahrain Victorious. And they've been freed to go on the hunt for stage wins to a large extent. The absence now of Jack Haig, who's broken his wrist. They still have Damiano Caruso in the bunch, who's trying to ride a good GC in this Tour, but not really amongst the big protagonists yesterday on the run to the line on La Planche de Belfi.
The gap goes under a minute for the first time. 16.3 kilometres to go. You can see on that graphic there, Catania's done 55% of the work, 45% by Fred Wright. That's according to the calculations of those who are working in the graphics truck at the moment. Nice to see the sun shining in Switzerland. And we're still waiting to see how this develops. There's a nervous excitement around the race here today. Certainly with how it worked out in Longwy, with the general classification getting involved. We wait to see how it develops, and it seems it's going to be that explosion of action again when we get into the final 5Ks and the final climb. The chase continues behind, and a couple more teams starting to appear now as we get threats and problems and road furniture maybe in the way of some of our general classification hopes. There was a rider from Jumbo-Visma there going south.
Mechanical. It looked like it was a drop chain. So just as they got around that traffic hole and maybe tried to hop over, it looked like a drop chain, but he was able to get it back on. The key to getting your chain back on without getting off and grabbing it is to use your shifters to shift back up to the big chain. But the key is stay relaxed, pedal slowly, and get it to flick back up and on. Too quickly, it'll go straight over the other side. You won't get it back on, and you're stranded.
Et de Prévérange. This is French-speaking Switzerland, by the way, the canton of Vaud. La Suisse romande. There you get the name Romandie, the Tour de Romandie.
Oh, they're putting up a wonderful fight.
Now then, problems behind, real problems behind for Total Energy and Pierre Latour. He's not involved in the general classification these days at 16 minutes down, but not a great time for a mechanical, that, Sean.
No, not at all. But again, when you're not in the GC standings, it's a relief, because otherwise it would be panic. When you see the way the peloton is blown apart here and gaps appearing, and when you're trying to get back in after a puncture, so he's just going to join some of these groups and come in today and wait for another day. But the two are doing a magnificent ride up front. We can see just around the 50 seconds at the moment, and Fred Wright, talking about him, he hasn't won races, but as under 23 level, he's won some magnificent races, notably a stage in the Tour l'Avenir, Baby Giro. He was European track gold medalist as well, so he is a proven rider, and he's only 23 years of age, let's not forget. So he's on the upward curve, let's call it. And we did see him in the Tour of Flanders, was it this year, where he was in the breakaway, and so he's a rider, he's an all-rounder, and with the man he's with, Cattaneo, he is a real powerhouse when he gets into the breakaways. So both of them are matching pretty well, and they're putting up a great fight.
exceptional in the classics was Fred Wright, as we saw Victor Lafay going backwards there for Cofidis. That's bad news for them.
Yeah, not going to be for him. I said I'm not sure what sort of form he's in. He's been a winner in the Tour of Spain in the past, but obviously struggling here today. But maybe for them, for Cofidis, Jon Izagirre possibly. He'll get himself up there.
14 long years and counting. 14 years, 16. No stage wins. 14.
I thought it was Stuart O'Grady in 2006. No, who was after that?
Sylvain Chavanel, Montluçon, 2008.
Should know that. I was there, but I was probably suffering somewhere out there.
he was a bit further up the road than you.
Little bit.
Crossing the line first, Robin. Here we go, one of the few uphill sections remaining before this final 5-kilometre climb. And the twists and turns are ones to note as well, Sean. I'm looking at that route in, and it's not a straight line in either into the climb, nor once you're on the climb itself.
No, and that's, I think, we heard from Bernie Eisel saying there, you know, there's a lot of street furniture in the final. And we did see there, you know, the corner when they took the right-hander there, the islands in the middle of the road as you come out. As you turn right, they are really, really dangerous, and you know you can get caught out so easy, and that's where you have to be, you know, so focused here, stay to the front, and yeah, it's another day where it's going to be stressful in the end, but it's looking like that the gap is starting to melt down a bit more now. 40 seconds, but still we're getting close to that. You know, 12 kilometres to go. It all depends how much they have left the two leaders out front.
Nata Verhooydonk got the back now. We've seen Steven Kruijswijk take up at the front. And we're starting to see, Robbie, now the GC teams form as well. Ineos Grenadiers looking after what? They're 3 or 4 leaders at the minute. We've got Jumbo-Visma over on the far side. David Gaudu and Valentin Madouas towards the front. You've got the pink jerseys of EF Education Easy Post. And, of course, the yellow jersey belonging to Tadej Pogacar on the left-hand side as we look at it now.
Well, if you look at Ineos Grenadiers, they've got as many leaders as they have domestiques, so it's a pretty tough situation. But at least they're cohesive. Look at them there on the left-hand side with the yellow helmets. As we go back up to the front, Catania and Fred Wright. A little bit of a freeze pick there, but this is what you just mentioned at the back. You're starting to see the teams coming to the front. Trek Segafredo, Mads Pedersen, he is bringing Jasper Stuyven with him. Balcom Oliver probably not far away either. In the middle, EF, Alberto Bettiol, a real candidate to get himself up there and, you know, have a go for the win today. He's definitely got the capability, and it would be, I think, the best way to repay his team for the cobbled stage antics a few days ago, to wipe that away.
That was Zo Eindel driving them into that particular set of road furniture. Stefan Bissegger bringing them out. And, of course, Bissegger, one of 4 Swiss home riders here with a big, big job to do. And through the middle, we've got movement.
And on the right side as well, look at the green jersey there, Wout van Aert, and on his wheel already, Michael Matthews. So he's tracking Van Aert. They're the two whose teams have been doing all the work, and the two big favourites most people can speak about. And then other side, bright yellow, standing out like a sunflower in a field. You can't miss him, Tadej Pogacar, and he will be amongst it. He loves to race.
Bora Hansgrohe, watch them today. Of course, they had disappointment yesterday, didn't they, with Alexander Vlasov losing time. But there was Michael Haller at the front. In the meantime, Mikkel Bjel's done his job for the day. And they're down yet another rider. The task must be to deliver Pogacar as close as possible to the line, Sean.
Yes, well, you have to stay, you know, real in the front here. We can see the street furniture, and that makes it, you know, so nervous. Everybody is trying to protect their leaders, keep him safe first of all, and then get him to the finish, deliver him into a position where, you know, he's not going to lose time. And yeah, that's what we're seeing now. The GC teams are starting to come to the front, but sometimes the GC teams, when they come to the front, they want to control the front, but they do not really push on at a real fast pace. The time they push on is when there's another team at the other side of the road going ahead of them, and it becomes a race between those teams. And sometimes that can be advantage for the breakout front. If you haven't got a team that really want to close it down and get it back to a sprint finish, it can play into the hands of the breakaway.
Yes, you're exactly right there. It's Sean, it's more about that holding position rather than chasing, but just the intensity of that fight for position is bringing them back anyway.
10 kilometres to go, 5 Ks until we get to the Côte du Stade Olympique, our final climb of the day. Going up to Lausanne, there's a 12% maximum gradient. There's a big swinging left hand off the quay of the lake up the hill. And this is the gap, 35 seconds for Cattaneo and Wright. Behind, the hungry pack is chasing. Robbie McEwen, we're going to send you off in a moment to go on to the breakaway. One last thought from you before then.
I'm still going with Wout van Aert versus Michael Matthews versus Tadej Pogacar, and I'm going with what I said in the breakaway this morning with my tip. Wout van Aert will win the stage.
Thanks, Robbie. We'll
see if I've still got the kiss of death.
And we'll see you after the stage alongside Ola, Dan and Adam, of course. Right here at the front. 9 kilometres to go, and Quinn Simmons now drives this along for Trek Segafredo through the centre. The black jerseys of DSM. They've had a disappointing day, losing Kevin Vermaak to that early crash that took quite a few down. And I guess as well, Sean, we might be about to see any sort of, you know, residual things from that crash that might have hurt people who want to have a go today as well.
Yes, well, that is possible. There was a lot of riders, you know, involved with the crash, and we did not have much information what the injuries were, so it could have an effect on what happened here. But it looks like that the advantage for the breakaway, still 8.6 to go, 36 seconds. It seems like that the stage win is going to come out of this group of riders here, and who will that be? And Roglic as well as another one, if he is feeling okay.
Sorry, Sean. Cattaneo dropped. Fred Wright too strong for him.
That's a surprise.
What a ride from the young man from London.
And this is not going to help, because they need the two there to be able to ride together with this slim advantage of 34 seconds. If the two were really, you know, equal and, you know, putting in a performance like Wright is able to do here, and Cattaneo just able to work away, because the little bit of rest time, if you get 100 metres in the wheel, then you can take a turn on the front again. But when you're out here alone, you know, with a big group of riders breathing down your neck, it's going to be 30 seconds. It's going to come down very quickly, and especially with the run up to the finish, when you have to, you know, ride like this so hard, and then you hit these difficult sections to get up to the finish. If it was a flat run in, 30 seconds would still be too little, but this one is not going to be enough.
And Filippo Ganna is now on the front for the Ineos Grenadiers. A couple of riders moving up the right-hand side as we look at it for Israel Premier Tech. On the left, Mathieu van der Poel is part of a team from Alpecin Phoenix. Who are they going to have a go with today? Will it be him? As Fred Wright has 30 seconds. Cattaneo there, I wonder what happened. Looks like he just completely ran out of gas. Fred Wright on fire. So he's 2 kilometres to go until there's this left turn, swing to the left, and the climb begins. And those of you watching the Tour de Romandie back in, what was the end of April, start of May, wasn't it? There was a time trial up here, so everyone should have done their homework who was around. Dillier trying to move up. In the meantime, riders dropped out the way. Giulio Ciccone is not going to take part. 1-2-6 there is Adrien Petit. He's not involved. They swing around to the right now. Marco Haller is there. Everybody just trying to stay upright. 29 seconds. Wright is putting in a tremendous performance. In fact, he's grown it out again to 30. Now, Age Desert Citroën moving up their man through the centre as well. Kuznetsov described as the little Alaphilippe by his teammate Oliver Naesen. And it is Naesen who's on the front now. That's Pedersen done as well. Staven's the man he put into position before. Six kilometres to go, 1K to the climb begins. Bike exchange moving up on the right, and Sean with Mathieu van der Poel working through the middle. It's not going to be for him today.
No, it's not.
Alpecin.
Yes, we can see there it's Philipsen who is third or fourth in the wheel of the Alpecin train there, with Van der Poel just keeping the pace right high, keep him in position, and yeah, it would be a surprise, a big surprise if Van der Poel could turn around, because the way he's been suffering, so he's in domestic duties today.
Here comes Jack Bauer trying to bring up Michael Matthews. Looks behind, but he can see Christophe Laporte on his wheel. Behind Laporte is Jonas Vingegaard, who's being looked after by the French sprinter today. We're coming up to 500 metres now until we turn that left swing. And away from the lake we'll go up to the hill, and it's all uphill to the line. This is a crucial point now, Sean Kelly.
Yes, and we just see Kelly Boone there, just very much to the front as well with Philippe Gilbert. But it looks like he was positioning Gilbert, actually, because Ewan seems to have slipped back a bit. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting final here. Is there somebody that we haven't really been talking about at all that can really pull it out here and do the ride and get the win here? But it looks like that, yes, the big ones are all in contention for the moment.
A brilliant breakaway from Fred Wright as he makes his last left turn on the flat. It's now all uphill to the line. There's that kilometre in the centre where it's flattish or even false flat downhill. A three-step climb to the finish this. The first bit for the first 2 kilometres, and you can see on that television shot just how steep it rises. Big crowd left and right. They've come out and forced to see the Tour de France return to Switzerland for the first time in a few years. That is Van der Poel done, and on the left-hand side now, everybody else trying to keep pace. Jumbo-Visma take control, but they have company, Sean.
Yes, well, there's a big mishmash of riders here. We can see here, you know, just looking around, waiting, and you know, there's some teams that might want to push on here. Other teams just want to keep the pace right high, but also thinking their sprinters not to burden them at this point.
And look at Pogačar. He's right at the front here, third wheel. No teammates around him, though, crucially. Or does that matter? Because you can see that as things start to swing and string out, Tadej Pogačar is right up there in second wheel, Sean.
Yes, well, he is a rider that can, you know, defend for himself when he gets to a point of the race. And when you get inside the final kilometres, we know Pogačar is able to just follow the other riders. We can see Vilmos there also. Very much will he be able to do a Mur de Bretagne on this one. But yeah, we can see there they're just waiting. And it's in the meantime, it's Cherel from AG2R who secures the pace.
Rafał Majka now trying to move up to help Tadej Pogačar. Remember, he was one of the 2 or 3 riders who set the pace wonderfully well. Fred Wright now, they've got him in sight. It looks as though he's going to be caught. Yates and Thomas there with the yellow helmets, navy and red tops. Bettiol in the pink. On the right-hand side, riders moving up for bike exchange with Michael Matthews on the right as we look at it now. Bora Hansgrohe on the left trying to move things up as well. Fred Wright still has a couple of 100 metres of a gap as they come up onto a 12% gradient now under the railway lines. If you've watched Romandie for the past few years, you've seen the time trials at the beginning and the ends of the race. These are the roads upon which they've raced before. Fred Wright has given his all today, but it's not going to be glory for him or Bahrain victorious. It's a hungry peloton chasing on behind, and they're racing to that let-up in the middle before it kicks up again. And Bora Hansgrohe really stringing this one out. It is going to be a very select group again, Sean Kelly.
Yes, it is, and we can see is that Conrad for Bora pushing on here and, you know, really putting under pressure a lot of the riders here. And yeah, there's riders and teams that want to do that. They want to make it difficult, and other teams want, you know, to just slow it down if possible. But it's a difficult task to, you know, to knock off the pace. There's always teams want to drive it on at this point, so close to the finish.
Wout van Aert in the green jersey today. Tadej Pogačar in the yellow, sitting in third wheel. Behind him, Vingegaard, who is watching him, marking him like a hawk. Roglic further back in the group. Caruso is following as Gaudu is at about 2 or 3 wheels at the moment, just behind Wout van Aert. Michael Matthews follows Van Aert at the moment. But remember, it was Matthews versus Pogačar the other day, and after Van Aert had been out in the breakaway on that long way to Longwy. 3Ks to go out the back. In the meantime is Bauke Mollema. He's not going to be a factor. Remember, crashed early on and was at the doctor's car as well. Coming up to the easier kilometre now. A little bit of a gap here. And it's Guillermo who has to close it.
Yes, well, he actually left the gap open. It looked like he was having difficulty getting his gear selection. or maybe the legs are not responding as he would like, but a little gap of maybe 2 bike lengths plus opening up there, and he's has to close it down himself. But we can see Van Aert, he's moved up a little bit more now, was a bit further back here, and yeah, it's an infernal pace again being set by the Bora Hansgrohe team. You can see the way it's stretched out at this point. That tells that, you know, everybody is all pretty much on the limit, and it's all about who has got that little bit extra left now for the final run to the line.
Timo Pino, Jasper Stuyven at the back, Tom Pidcock in about 15th position through the centre, Nairo Quintana up there as well. Approaching the final kick up to the line where the gradient hits 12% yet again. 51 kilometres per hour on this false flat downhill section. Bora Hansgrohe and Patrick Conrad are driving the pace at the front. Ken has done the work, he is done for the day. All day it's been Jumbo Visma and Bike Exchange who have ridden. Andreas Kron moving up on the left-hand side, he's got a real kick on him to the finish. We've seen Michael Woods up there in the blue jersey of Israel Premier Tech. They will be buoyed, remember, having taken their first ever Tour de France stage win the other day on the cobbles. Still Conrad who rides through the centre, then Micah, and then the race leader. A reminder that Tadej Pogačar is looking to make it a hat-trick of wins today. 3 days in succession maybe, as Matthews, his big mate and rival, starts to move up in the blue jersey. He loses his last domestique on the right-hand side. Coming up to the turn that takes them into the final rise to the line now. And here it comes uphill. That speed will certainly move down. Enric Mas, closest to the front of the race. He's been all tour so far in that dark blue Movistar jersey. And this is such a small select group. Matthews on your screen there in the blue and white. Interesting, Sean, that Tom Pidcock moves right up onto his wheel. He is wearing the white jersey, remember, looking for his first win at this level.
Yes, we did not see Pidcock, for a number of kilometres there. Now he's suddenly appearing and getting himself into position. And we can see here for the moment, there's a little bit of just waiting. The pace is not as high as it was, just a little bit further back down the road here. And yeah, positioning now is going to be important. From this point in, you have to be in that top, 5 or 6 places and get in the wheel that you need to be in, meaning the ones who are going to go a bit further out maybe in the sprint. If you can get in those wheels, well then that will be the perfect lead out, because that is going to be important here, that you time your sprint perfectly.
Pretty sure that Jasper Philipsen is still just about hanging on at the back here. 1.2 kilometres to go now. Remember, 12% maximum gradient before we get onto a slightly easier section of around 4% to the finish. It's long wheel all over again. Will we have the same result? This is Rafał Majka. And there's Philipsen. He hung on, but a kilometre to go after all that work. He's dropped. It's the GC guys plus a couple more, Sean, into the final K.
Yes, well, it's the boys we were talking about. The Matthews, the riders who couldn't get over this sort of lumpy stuff are still in there. And it's a question of now how much they have got. Have they been digging too deep to be able to produce a sprint? But you have to just, try here. And, yeah, the real sprinters just that little bit too difficult for him in this run in today.
How long will Micah go here? Shakes his head. You get the feeling there might not be too much left. 840 metres to go as Wout van Aert sits on the wheel of Pogačar. Vingegaard is there as well. A look around, we see Schachmann, who crashed earlier on today, and there are more gaps. There are more riders dropped at the end. The pace is infernal here with Michael Woods hanging in and hanging around. We could have a crazy mix of different round. The riders riding away from it and up the hill in Lausanne, the home of the Olympic movement. It's outside the stadium. Will finish in 550 metres time, and the leader of the Tour de France, who's won for the past 2 consecutive days, sits, waits and looks. Will it be a hat-trick? You can see on the left-hand side, several riders start to think about winding it up. Cofidis, with 2 riders in there looking for their first win in 14 years. But look at Wout van Aert, riding for a team that is winning all the time. He himself has won in the yellow jersey as we come up to 400 metres to go now. Michael Matthews in the blue and white. Look out for him. Keep going. Bob Jungels is there on the left-hand side as well. It's a mighty mix of riders here with a headwind into the finish. You have to time it right. And the sprint has launched. It's Cofidis going through in the middle. Jungels Pogacar's on the left-hand side as well. Matthews trying to come around. It's Matthews and Pogacar over again. Look out in the red there for Andreas Kron. 150 metres to go. Now Matthews goes full gas. Matthews at the front, looking for that first win in 5 years. But here comes Wout van Aert. Van Aert is accelerating. Van Aert comes through the centre. The green jersey has it again. He waited. But it's Swiss timing from Wout van Aert as stage 8 of the Tour de France is won by the big